allocate the time to provide us really in-depth information about their buildings and their procedures. We told them it would take him 20 to 30 minutes, but some of them actually took an hour, 45, 2.5 hours to really give us good information. We vastly underestimated the time that it would take them to do it, but we're glad that they put in that time. We asked them to complete all of that information by July 11th so we could review it as a committee and establish recommendations and start moving forward on any issues that we needed to immediately address. Now, the results of the questionnaire and other conversations we've had either with principals, directors, or with members of the EMT will influence our recommendations and also updates to the incident command manual and training videos. As noted before, our incident command manual is the backbone of guidance for our folks in our schools of how to respond to emergencies. The incident command manual was updated in 2016 after we had a series of incidents in our school district that led us to see that we really needed to give more guidance to our schools and how to respond, and also provide a schedule for drills so we can have that quote unquote muscle memory of our students, faculty, and staff to respond to any type of an emergency. That incident command manual has been updated yearly, actually more than yearly, right, Kirsten? Whenever we see there to be an issue with it. And the most recent draft has been sent to the Board of Education and to other administrators in the district so we can get input and have it prepared for the first day of school this year. Now, EMT, and you'll see some board members are on EMT, have met last week to discuss the review, the rollout of the information about the facilities, our character education life skill programs, procedures. Let me run down really quickly what we've done and the ongoing tasks. We've done an audit of employee card access permissions. Basically, we wanted to know who has access to our buildings, when and why, and then what level of permission should be granted to employees as we move forward. We've done an audit of our visitor check-in compliance. A big shout out to Susan, our parent engagement coordinator, who has undertaken that to make sure that all of our schools are aware of the process that we have to approve our volunteers and have parent check-in when they're at the school as a visitor. We've done an audit of emergency drill compliance. We've done a development of life skills and character education programs. We've done an update to our incident command manual to add 2 new protocols, a hold and a run, hide, fight. We clarified the differences between a shelter in place and a lockdown. We had the creation of a public explainer video of some of those new protocols, hold, run, hide, fight. And we worked with our local law enforcement agencies and our principals to identify external doors that were open in a lockdown. We are distributing to schools new lockdown and inside threat cards and shelter in place and outside threat cards and all clear cards. This is what we basically serve as our signal in our schools. If there's an emergency, all they got to do is swipe a card that sends out a message to all of our folks who need to respond in a hurry. We've distributed new cards to our secondary schools, is that right? And we'll continue in distributing those to our schools in our middle schools and our elementaries. We have planned a quote unquote secret shopper and random checks at facilities. We've assigned these to various EMT members. What we mean by this is after school, during school, before school, various members of EMT will be asked to go to randomly selected schools, circle the building, check all external doors to see if they've locked and all of our emergency systems are in place. Also, perhaps to put a pebble in a door, close the door and see how long it takes for people to figure out that not all doors are closed. That has been assigned out to various EMT members. That'll be done after school starts. So we have a good idea of if we have the right things in place. So we have exterior doors all locked at the times that have been prescribed. You'll see here that we have the Telecenter U system pilot at 7 schools. This is just with our own phone system, how they can use it to communicate with each other in an emergency within the school. And we can bring something to the board if you would like in the future. We've done it to EMT. They've taken a look at it. It's a really slick way of folks to be able to communicate with each other within a school, and how to do broadcast messages within a school in the event of an emergency. Kirsten and I are also working on re-recording all of our emergency notifications. If you recall, a few years ago, we recorded about 10 to 12 messages that we could upload and send out within seconds. And we did so in response to any possible emergency that we could see happening. We did that because we have found that our community tells us they want information fastest. So we did kind of a catch-all message for, say, a lockdown or a shelter in place or an evacuation. And then we had them translated for our communities, and it could be delivered to the parents in the language that they speak at home. If we don't pre-record those, it takes us a second to write it, record it, and send it out. What we have now is a system where in just a few moments, we can identify what the emergency is, what the response is, hit send. In just a few moments, our parents will get a robocall, a text, and an email. We're going to change some of the language we learned from Uvalde. The message that went out to parents in Uvalde was much like our message that we have now, which is our school has gone into a lockdown. Students and teachers remain safe. We will give you more information as it becomes available. That's what parents got. But by then they've known that not all teachers and students were safe. We want to change our language so we don't happen to give that information to our parents in an emergency. We'll be re-recording those. We've collaborated with our local law enforcement partners to do trainings at our schools. Most recent at Sandy, where they did an active shooter training at Mount Jordan Middle School. We're preparing messages for parents, guardians, employees about our safety review. We're ongoing a CSTAG, which is the threat assessment training of our administrators and staff. We're doing our prepare crisis prevention and response training, risk management, student services, and school personnel at the National School Safety Conference, and brought back very incredibly information. We are talking about hall monitors, and Dr. McGill and his team has prepared modules of hall monitors. So all of our hall monitors have a good idea of what they should be doing to be the eyes and the ears in the hallways of our schools, and even discussing how to expand the role of a hall monitor and provide additional training as well as opportunities for them to meet together, talk about current and common questions and issues facing our schools, and how we can have a system of safety advocates, so to speak, in our hallways that are trained the same way, know all across the board what to look for, and work together on solving some of these system-wide issues. And we also submitted a grant through the School Violence Prevention Program. It's a grant through COPS. Now, responses from principals that we thought we wanted to put on the table, we're not asking for a response. We just thought you might find this interesting. We asked if principals thought a restriction or prohibition of cell phone use in Canyons District schools, if it would reduce bullying and harassment in our schools. 27 of the 41 said yes, 14 of the 41 said no. Now, please take note, we did not do a yes or no. Should we ban or restrict cell phones? We asked a different question, but it still does start the conversation about the use of cell phones in schools. We also asked about the cost of school resource officers. We have wonderful partnerships with our local law enforcement agencies, and we have 15 SROs. We asked our principals, in your estimation, should we invest in additional SROs? 24 said yes, 17 said no. Now, this is another one. Would you support implementing student uniforms as a supplement to the school climate and to more easily identify visiting students? 24 yes, 17 no.
So it would be interesting to know if those are all high schools and middle schools and the 14 was elementary schools.
So Clarion, I do have that information.
Awesome.
I will give it to you.
That, please.
Yes.
Send it to all of us.
Yes, I will.
Same with the cell phone.
Yeah, same
Yes.
with the other two.
Absolutely, yes. Recommendations that we are making. All Canyons District wear their badges at all times. We have already implemented this. We are creating substitute access cards and ID badges for substitute teachers and staff. All visitors to our schools and facilities will check in at main offices and receive a visitor badge. All volunteers will continue to undergo background checks and check in at the main office to receive their volunteer badges. Why? If there's an adult in one of our buildings, they need to have one of these. And if they don't, it should say substitute. If not, it should have a sticker that says visitor. That way, all of our children and our employees know that they have gone through the process to be approved to be in our schools.
Jeff, can I ask a question? We know that the substitute, and we know that we have a list of who they are. So why cannot they have a picture on their badge? A substitute on their badge?
There's no reason they can't. This is all recommendations. If you would like us to move forward with something like that, we can ask HR if it would be possible. Our idea was to make the substitute cards a different color. And so when they got to the school in the morning, it was coded so that they could then get into the interior parts of the building. So if a substitute needed to get into the faculty room, into the faculty restrooms, into their room, or they needed to have the key card to get in from the playground, it would be coded for that particular school, but the color of it would indicate to anyone who knew that, say, orange was the substitute color, they would know that they were the substitute. If not, every time they were substituting in a different school, we'd have to recode the card.
No, I didn't mean to code the card, but just to have them have their picture on it that said substitute. And then that actually carry two, right?
They could.
One for that day, for that school, and one that's their identification. Because like if you did have a shooter in place, then if the police came in, they would have an identification card with their picture to identify that they are a substitute.
So
That's all.
do you want to put that on the list? We'll talk about it in EMT. Good suggestion. Or you can bring it up because Clarine is a member of EMT as well.
Granite does that for all their subs.
Okay. Good idea. The other recommendation, well, what we've done is we did an audit of all of the key card access. We've done a review of the permissions, and we will review this annually. We're suggesting that we have an all access all the time card, but that's for a limited number of administrators in our district. We'll work with the superintendent and the business administrator on who should have that access. Then all access 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. Local access all the time, such as a principal or a head custodian. Local access 4 a.m. to 11 p.m., such as for a coach. And then local access 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. And then we'll talk about Monday, Friday access and Sunday access. Those are the levels that we're proposing. Of course, they can be fine-tuned, but those are the levels that we think will best suit the needs of the people in our community without just opening the door access to everybody. We were going to limit exterior master key access to building administrators and assistant facility managers. That's the recommendation that we're making. Annually review the employees with alarm code and card access. This is something that we find important. We should know as a district, and our building administrators should know who has key card access and who has code access. We want to determine the adequate number of walkies for schools to have at elementary, middle, and high school levels. We are proposing that elementary and middle school external doors remain locked during school hours and accessible by card access only, with exception to the secured main entrance. Security vestibules may remain open in the morning to allow students to get to class on time, but for no longer than 10 minutes after the morning bell. Access to the school from within the office should not be programmed open. That gives kids 10 minutes to get to class after the bell. After that, they'll have to go to the main office. High school external doors. We're asking for all the external classroom doors to remain locked. The exception would be the main entrance and other doors deemed necessary to permit students to head to LDS Seminary or CTEC or the field houses. But the exterior classroom doors to remain closed, locked. We're recommending to build a timeline for moving all schools onto the same surveillance system. We want to train district and the school administrators, principals, assistant principals, head secretaries, and hall monitors how to review and access surveillance. We're creating a central command structure and emergency operations plan for the district office in the event of a natural disaster or a crisis affecting multiple schools. The plan will include alternate means for communication And we're also suggesting to create unification standards for schools to use following an evacuation for a school closure. This was a heavy lift. Now, of course, we're making recommendations. We're presenting it to you now. We'll give you these. We'll send it to you tomorrow as recommendations. If you have any questions, please contact a member of the EMT, contact me, contact Ryan, contact the superintendent, Leon. We can talk through these. We won't move immediately on some of these recommendations, but if you would please think about it, we would like to move forward because we want our schools to be as safe as possible.
I have two questions.
Please do.
Question number one is you've gone through active shooter drill with Sandy and Draper.
Yes.
Is there anything in place to do that with schools that are served by UPD?
Yes.
Okay, yes is a good answer.
Yes.
When an employee terminates employment, does the ID badge get turned in?
Yes.
I've worked for 40 years in the district. I'd like to have that for my book of remembrance. Can I keep it? Okay.
The procedures we'll put into place, we're going to renew our emphasis on the key card access and identification. So in the rare instances where somebody said, I would love to keep this for posterity, we will say thank you, but no, this is something that we need.
So is there a timeline? So I had my picture taken in 2002. I haven't had it retaken. So, 20 whatever years later, do we have them renew their pictures so that they look like their picture?
I look nothing like my photos. We can. I think that that's something we can put on the table so that we have fresh photographs of our employees. We do a Life Touch photo offering every single year for yearbooks.
Right.
So it is something we can definitely put in as a measure so that everybody's key cards have a relatively recent photo.
Can it match also what they are like? I know somebody who was a principal and now they're a coach, but their ID says principal still. Like I was a coach and mine is a teacher now. So mine still says coach, but it doesn't say teacher. So maybe we can update what the position they have too when we update pictures.
Any other questions, President Tiggy?
Okay. So thank you so much. And like you said, it's a heavy lift, but I
let it grow out.
think you're only the beginning of the heavy lifting here. And I appreciate that. And I think the board appreciates that. I think it would be helpful if we had this type of a report, especially with this list of recommendations, so that we can keep updated, so the public can keep updated. If we maybe on a quarterly basis had a report back at board meetings, so we can maybe set that up at least for the foreseeable future. So we on a regular basis, we'll have these kind of conversations and updates. So
We'll be happy to come back with a new report. Yes.
Final comment, just hoping that note of talking to Steve Bailey as far as the surveillance goes. Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, Steve.
Really, I just want to express my appreciation. We've had 2 years now with COVID. We get to this summer, everything's, we're going to take it easy. And we did this measure feat with, this meetings with a lot of people during the summertime to get this done. And I'd like to express my appreciation to all of our staff and board members who participated in that. I think we got some good stuff and put out a lot of positive things, point out a couple of things we can focus on too, which is in the audit.
Yes, it was eye-opening, and I'm glad that we focused on facilities and our procedures and of course school climate's so important for school safety.
I have really appreciated the sense of urgency associated with this.
We have moved fast,
We
haven't
have
we?
moved very quickly, and I am probably the worst example of wearing these things. Today they had a luncheon over at the transportation department, and I thought after all the discussions we've had this summer, I found mine, dug it out and wore it. Superintendent noticed that I had it on. And I think that as board members, it behooves us to actually wear our ID tags when we're in the buildings.
We should set the example. You're right, because
Yeah.
we should.
thank you. Let's see, Clarine and then Amanda, and then if it's all right, I'd like to move on to the next item.
I was just gonna say, be glad that there's 7 board members and not just one, because I'd be making you put up 12-foot fences, so we were.
Prison.
And because I just think it's safe, then there's one way in and one way out, and that's how all my kids went to school, and they seem to manage just fine, but anyway, just thankful there's 7 of us.
I was gonna tell you, I liked the videos, and I think that those will be really helpful.
Yes.
You know, similar to some of the discussion we had about making sure that parents are aware of what drills, what expectations, what things will be happening. I think those will be very helpful for parents to go over with their kids and have discussions. I really appreciate the support it provides.
Thank you.
Anything else, President Tingy?
No,
Okay,
thank
just-
you so much to you and the
Thank you.
team and everyone involved, and we will look
Yes.
forward to seeing you reporting back on some of these.
So anybody on EMT, would you please raise your hand?
Recognize the work.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
These guys did such yeoman's work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, next item, board, on this agenda is a report on district library services. So, while getting the presentation up, I will turn time over to Gretchen Lights up, and who is our library media specialist. So Gretchen, we'll turn the time over to you.
So I'm gonna start with the requisite joke. Why did the school librarians buy so many books?
Good job.
They had no shelf control.
You're in competition now.
Today actually marks the my first anniversary with Canyons. I walked through the door a year ago today. So thank you for like letting me take it slow and ease in and
Sarcasm.
Sarcasm there.
So I want to take us back to what school libraries was like when I walked in. And today we're only talking about the state of our elementary libraries because I was given 10 minutes. So I'm going to do my best, but we're just talking about the 29 elementary schools had a total of 16,022 students. Our typical kindergarten student was born in 2016, and our typical 5th grade student was born in 2011. So I hope that puts everything in context moving forward. I believe that reading is the most important academic skill. I believe that if a student can read, they can learn anything. Our motto in CSD Library Services is to read is to learn. We have an identified problem within the district. This is probably not news to you, but according to our Cadence data, 36% of our elementary students read below or well below grade level. That number is 2% higher than it was in 2016 when our 5th grade students were in K1. And 2% may not seem very high, but it's 320 students, which is the equivalent of Edgemont and almost the equivalent of Sprucewood. At 36%, we have 5,768 students who are currently reading below or well below grade level at the elementary level. I believe that school libraries can be part of the solution. School libraries exist to provide equitable access to reading materials. They're essential for students. Dr. Robbins, if I wanted to be better at passing and catching a football, what would I have to do?
Do it. Learn by doing.
I learned by doing it, so I have to practice, right? I'd have to practice. I would need gear. I would need some place to practice, and I would need the best conditions for the best outcome. However, that practice is a little difficult, and I'm going to explain why. Students learn to read in the classroom, but they practice reading in the school library. That's why we exist, is to help support schools and classroom teachers. Everything that's taught in the classroom can be practiced in the library, and the most important thing is reading. My son's football coach told him that champions were made in the off season, which means that, you know, if you only play football from August to November, you're never going to be as good as the other person on the field who's practicing all year round. If students only practice reading in the classroom when they're in school, they're never going to be as strong as readers as they would if they practiced outside of the classroom. For many of our students, the library is the only place they have access to the materials they need to practice reading. If reading practice was like football practice,
2 days.
ideally, we would be giving our students the best gear, the highest quality reading material possible for them to practice reading. However, reading practice looks more like the picture on the right than the picture on the left. Let me explain. At the beginning of this year, we had 302,407 total print books on our shelves in our elementary school libraries, which would be amazing since ideally we would have 15 books per student. So that number puts it at 18 plus. However, the average publication date of the titles in our elementary school is 2005, which means that the average age of our collection is 17 years old. So I have included in the blue binders that I had Cindy share with each of you an example of a book that we took off the shelf this week at one of our elementary schools. It's not that the fiction titles are necessarily like dating themselves, but we know that 80% of the nonfiction on our shelves are outdated or irrelevant. At the beginning of last year, we had no schools whose collections were under 10 years old. We had 12 schools that were between 11 and 15, and we had 17 schools that were 15 years or older. We have one school that's in excess of 20 years. Based on the number of books on the shelf and the age of those books, we have 2 collections that are in such poor condition that it would be more, it would be less expensive to actually replace the entire collection than it would be to update what we have on the shelf. That data comes from a slide that looks like this. In your blue binders, each of the board members has this information for each school where your students, where your constituents are enrolled. And Leon and Dr. Robbins have slides that represent every school in the district. So you can see this school is emerging. They have 10 items per student. The average age is 2006. That means an emerging goal. And actually the school is working towards being exemplary, but we are looking at a $20,000 investment by their principal at the end of last year. So through some reading work that needs to take place, we'll see where they land at the end of next year. You also have a slide that looks like this for each collection. the schools where your constituents attend. Collection development is more than just purchasing books. Collection development is actually a science. It takes some knowledge about reading trends and the types of information that are available to students to develop a collection that meets the needs of today's students and the students of the future. In your binders, you'll find information that explains how to interpret this data, and I would be happy to meet with you and talk to you about each of your schools if you're interested. A win for our students would be that they would have access to current high quality collections in the future, but that would take an equitable funding model and an additional investment by the community. Ideally, if I wanted to be better at football, I would have a place to practice. So if reading practice is like football practice, this is the reality for a lot of our students, in that the entry gate to their practice field is locked. The typical elementary student attends library once a week as part of the brain booster rotation, which means that at some of our schools, the library is actually closed 1 day a week, and at some of our schools, it's closed 2 days a week. A typical library brain booster class is 30 minutes long, which includes 10 minutes of transition time to and from the library to the classroom. So it means they actually have less than 30 minutes in the library, and it often includes 10 minutes of face-to-face instruction and 10 minutes to browse and borrow books. So we've just determined that we have almost 6,000 students that are struggling readers. I have trouble finding books in 10 minutes that I want to read. So we typically given students 10 minutes or less to find the book along with all the other classmates, line up, have the book checked out, and line up again. So our students typically
Do they not read a book to the students in that time too? So really they only have about.
Well, you have 10 minutes to do some kind of face-to-face instruction. So that's typically when a book might be read during that time.
They're not read across the school district on the elementary level.
The instruction varies by school and by the person that's giving the instruction. So our average elementary student has 10 minutes a week to browse a collection. We just said there's 10,000 books in every collection, and we've given them 10 minutes to find something we want. Win for our students would be a discussion about changing the scheduling so that students, especially those who are struggling, have greater access before, after, and during school. We want the optimum experience when you're practicing. You want to be able to feel confident that you're getting everything that you need to be successful. Just like our Coeur Canyons football team. However, it's less ideal in our elementary libraries.
A little bit of a backfire comment.
So, the information landscape that our students are entering is more complex than ever before. Access to reliable, credible, verifiable information is essential for civic agency and action. Our students are not being prepared during their library time to enter the minefield that is the information landscape. You can see these are the core standards for library instruction. So reading engagement, information and research, and media literacy. Yet we've just determined that our students only have 10 minutes of face-to-face instruction, which is the equivalent of 5.5 hours a year. A win for our students would be the opportunity to receive effective information and media literacy instruction during library time. Our end goals for library service is to have a greater investment by school communities in an equitable school library fund model that would provide resources needed to update the elementary print collections, a reconsideration of future school schedules in order to provide students with greater access to the library before, after, and during school, and a district-wide information and media literacy framework that informs how students learn to locate, evaluate, and use accurate information. The purpose of a quality school library program is to provide equitable access, period, to everything. Information, materials, space, instruction, and most importantly, so that students have the information and stories they need to make their hopes and dreams come true. If I want to learn what it's like to be a YouTuber and I'm in 3rd grade, I want to find a book on how to be a YouTuber. If I want to find a book on, the hottest K-pop group, if I want to find a book about esports, if I want to find a book about something I'm really interested in, I want to be able to do it at my school library. I'm hoping that you will join me. I'm inviting you, I'm pleading with you as policymakers and people who make decisions about budgets to help us improve the situation in our elementary school library so that our students are prepared for middle school and beyond.
Thank you so much. I think, Lord, do you have a few questions or comments?
Yeah, so love your end goals. So what we can do as a board to help you with those end goals? Do you have a plan to give to us as to what we can do to support you and maybe a budget to cost so we can sort of take it out over a couple of years?
So currently we are well funded. It's just not equitably distributed. So the state gives us $1.10 per student, which we receive after the seat count every year. The high schools, they receive $17 plus change per student. The middle schools receive $15 plus change, and the elementary schools receive $12. The problem is the high schools have the largest populations and they get the most money. So they often have money they can't spend, and we could spend it all and then some. We also have in the past allowed the library instructional technicians to manage the selection of titles purchased at the school level. I do not think that that is the proper way to move forward. We have just brought on a licensed elementary teacher librarian who will serve as the purchasing agent for all 28 of our schools in this upcoming year. So she has 9 years in library services and will be able to help us with our goals to improve our collection development, both in purchasing and in maintenance.
Can we do anything with transferring the funds, or is it attached 17 to high schools, 15 and 12?
We can change that easy.
It is, pardon me, what?
We can change that easy.
So it's just an allocation that we can maybe move around based upon
So-
need, Deb.
So that's how it's funded to the district, and it's up to the district.
No.
That's just how we've allocated.
Okay.
The state funds everybody the same.
The state funds everybody the same, but that's only
It's only $1.
that's only about 30,000.
And we probably have access to the data of how frequently those libraries are used. I would assume that the elementary library is used more frequently than the high school.
We have probably the highest rate of circulation in the elementary schools, but if you look at your data, we're just circulating the same books over and over again.
I'm just saying if we're allocated $17 per student to the high school, my assumption is that the high schoolers are not checking out as many books frequently as the elementary schoolers.
Our circulation data would agree with that.
Yes.
But they're checking out different kinds of books. I think some of the books that they have in the high school libraries are more expensive. Some of them textbooks or ACT
Right.
review.
But she's just saying the data does support that. So it does make sense to reallocate.
Well, when you look at an elementary school, every elementary student does go to the library.
That's right.
And we encourage
Their schedule.
every student to check out a book, at least one, sometimes more than one.
Yes.
At the high school, not every student goes to the library every week.
That was my other question. So in my elementary, we can have the kids check out 2, and that's so that they have 1 in class to read. And then during silent sustained reading, which people do and do not believe in, but I do. And then 1 to take home. But if they only check out 1, then they don't either have 1 for class or they don't have 1 for home. So can we get to the point we can check out 2?
So this year, I'm providing guidance that every student, 1st grade through 5th grade, can take out 2 books. So we haven't had anything standardized where there's been guidance given to all of the library ITs. And so I've spent the last year kind of gathering data about how different libraries are run. We've found out a lot of things that were disappointing. We found out that some of the library ITs were actually encouraging kids not to take books home over vacation because they were afraid they were going to get lost, instead of where I would have said, take more books.
Right.
home over vacation.
Yeah.
We found out that, like, through purchasing, some of our library ITs have, like, they don't believe in superhero books. So one of the libraries doesn't have any superhero books. I don't know what they're reading. So we're buying new superhero books, but it just hasn't been a priority in the district. And there are some things that are systematic that are actually not beneficial for our students.
So I know that the administration at each building decides how many minutes they go in there based on their brain boosters, right? And and also based on their aides that work in the library and how much money they have. But I'm wondering if there's a way to have them have a double time to go in, like 1 time to select a book and 1 time just to read or something.
So because almost what we're finding is every school's schedule is slightly different. So we've talked about the typical, we do have 1 or 2 schools where they have an hour. And then we have some schools where they not only go in with their class of maybe 30 kids, but they also go in with half of another class. So there's 45 kids in the library at one time.
Will I ever get to read during that time?
So it's just a variety of experiences that our students are having, which we consider to be slightly inequitable.
And Mont has a comment too.
I want you to know, I 100% totally agree with the idea that if you can't read, you can't do much of anything. If I can't read, math is really, really hard. If I can't read science, it really gets tough. If I can't read, I can't succeed anywhere. But I want to go back to your football analogy. I was not much of a football player, okay? I'm not 6 foot whatever, you know?
Me neither, actually.
But I
My
will
football
tell you,
career was cut short.
I will tell you where I learned how to snow ski. And I will tell you where I learned how to water ski. And I will tell you where I learned how to play golf. And that was in my own home with my own parents working with me. And the whole idea of what we've got there is somewhere, somehow, we need to solicit the support of parents to read with their own kids to make it happen.
So having parents read to children is the best indicator for success on standardized testing. I mean, and we would love that. And we think we can help do that. Several initiatives.
And there's got to be a very, very high correlation between the kid that's a math wizard and his parents reading with him at home or her at home. And somewhere, somehow, I think you've got to get, and libraries, oh my gosh, Salt Lake County Library, you can get any ebook you want on, you know, and have access to that.
There's a lot of work to be done. I consider it job security. I've survived the first year, I might survive the next year.
My wife's on special ed, and that's what she said, as long as they keep raising their kids this way, I'll never be unemployed.
So that comment was a perfect segue to what I was gonna say. I was headed in the same direction. I think your presentation is brilliant, Gretchen, and I think that the next place is to go to the parents. We need like a library media campaign, you know, where this information, where it's getting out, you know, I mean, what's one of the number one problems with the kids we're raising today, especially the young kids? They're always reading graphic novels, right? And to try to get them to move over, not that we'd rather that than nothing, right? But, you know, I think lessons and, you know, even a night with parents to come and talk about the importance or some communication home that we have really great communication to get parents really excited about this. I think building more time into the schedules is super important. And I also think in light of what's happened in the last year with the discovery of some books that parents were concerned about, it would also be just so great and informational for parents to know, hey, you can actually go on their account. You can put holds so your kids don't check out books you're worried about. Because if you are not informed as a parent and you're getting this communication, we're going to go to the library more and your kids are going to check out more. You know, some of these parents that have been following these things in the news, their first reaction might be fear, right? Uh-oh, are my kids going to get exposed to books that I don't want them to be exposed? So I think that educational tool too of how to put things on hold and just really work as partners with the parents as far as encouragement and battle of the books we have in some of our elementary schools. We don't have it in all of, but I heard we're getting it back.
So
Are we getting it back?
So we have several reading initiatives.
Yes.
One of them is called Book Blitz Junior, which is the canyonized version of Battle of the Books,
Okay.
which is being offered to every
Elementary.
school. It's a choice. It's an opt-in. I'm presenting on Thursday to the PTSAs about that opportunity. We have some non-scientific data from Oakdale last year that students who participated in school level book blitz in fourth grade,
Yes.
did better in their reading scores at the end of the year than they did at the beginning of the year. So we're hoping to bring that opportunity. I mean, we have a lot of ideas,
Awesome.
but I've only been here a year. And some of my 5-year plan got moved up.
Okay, so let's see.
I know we're
Yeah, we are, but so let's just finish Clarine, Amanda, and then Steve.
So I was just thinking, adding to what you were talking about was maybe there can be a before school parent library check out or an after school parent library check out at every school. So it wouldn't take only.
Well, we're not staffed that way right now. So that would be a discussion with the principals.
The administration.
Yeah, but yeah. I mean, so at the elementary school I worked at in New York, we had our book fair on a night we called Books and Basketball, where there was actually a parents versus teachers and admin basketball game during a literacy night, which was also our book fair. So there's a lot of things we could do to raise the excitement around reading and books in our communities, but we have to start somewhere, and it's easy to start in a collection.
Oh, and thank you for the book. I just went to 6th grade and we have to do the solar system and we'll use this book.
Yeah, well, you should check the publication date. I think it's in the 90s.
I was almost 100 years ago.
Had a planet.
I think I really care.
Yesterday's.
2002 edition.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
care. All books are good books and I have a ton in my own.
Pluto was a planet in a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Was what changed?
real quick, so to Mon's point, in terms of having parents read to their children, I do think one of the things that I read through on Word docs was also about how many different languages we have. And I think it stands to reason that we need to make sure we have diversity of languages available for.
So I'm going to pass this out. I actually have 2 really great plays that we had in our libraries this year. One was where we provided a book, Dogman in Chinese, to students. That's his home language. And then the very impressive statistics from East Midvale, where they circulated 59 books in Arabic, 1 in Dinka, 2 in French, 7 in Japanese, even though no student in our school currently speaks Japanese at home. They circulated 6 books in Kinyarwanda, 5 in Dari, 5 in Russian, 208 in Spanish, and 12 in Swahili.
Awesome.
And I have one of these for, if I forgot to get them in your binders.
So I'm friends with one of the administrators at Juan Diego. And one of the things that he shared with me is that they feel very strongly that some of their strong ACT scores that have come in their high school is due to a practice that they have of making sure that the high schoolers have a full half hour of reading time every day. They go into the auditorium, the kids have to turn off their cell phones and they're expected to read. And it's something that's essentially enforced and it's institutionalized and all of the students expect it. And I've often thought, would we be well served by doing something like that? You know, whether it's high school, middle or elementary, I'm not sure, but I think, you know, I recognize that not every parent, especially if you're working multiple jobs or if you don't speak the language that your child's studying in school, it makes it harder to read to them. Although I would say that they should always read to them in their native tongue if at all possible. But I think making sure that there's a structure set up for the kids where daily reading becomes a habit, I think would be really worthwhile. Maybe that's something that we think about. I have really fond memories as an elementary school child of participating in a readathon every year with my elementary, similar to the Battle of the Books. And I was introduced to so many different books that way. And it did motivate me to go into the school library. And that brings me to another point. I know that there are times, and depending on who's staffing when and how that is working, that some of the students that I've talked to or their parents have said, my kid doesn't always feel encouraged to go into the library. Like sometimes they feel like they're a bother in the librarian, or that, you know, they might be getting to school early and the librarian's not prepared to, quote unquote, watch them or whatnot. I'm wondering if there's anything that we can do to adjust our policies to make sure that the libraries are always an open space, even if it's during lunchtime. I don't know if maybe they shouldn't be allowed to eat in there necessarily, but if they have extra time, that's a welcoming place for kids, in my opinion. But
right, so elementary is a different beast than secondary.
sure.
So, and it just takes kind of the will and the planning of the administration to figure out what that looks like in each campus. But it's hard to fake reading for 20 minutes. You can fake reading for 10 minutes. It's hard to fake reading for 20 minutes. So it's called drop everything and read for your time, which is a practice in other locations where students have that 20-minute period where they read all the time. And that way, they need resources to continue that practice, and they get them in the school. Steve?
My book is so old, it's only in Roman numerals.
So I.
That's how hard it is.
I took a book off the shelf that was the edition I spent my first babysitting money on. So that was not recently.
So my question other than that, thank you. I'll read these books. I always went into. Many of our young children that are falling behind have parents that don't read English. Is there any programs that we're working with those parents that, especially at the young age, they can sort of grow up learning to read English with their children?
So the principal at Copperview reached out to me because even though she has a high percentage of students that are multilingual learners, they're almost all Spanish speaking. And so we're updating their collection to provide a number of books that are in English and Spanish, so that the student could read with their parent. And just be, one side would be in Spanish and one side would be in English.
I'm just wondering, is there any books that they're written that help parents teach their own kids, and they learn English at the same time, so that they can sort of learn it like their kids do? be beneficial to the individuals to know English also, but especially for later on with kids.
Well, I'm sure we can partner with other departments in building more expertise in actual learning.
I'm just thinking that. Because I think a lot of parents would probably love to spend more time with them reading, but they're reading in their native language, not what we need to do the tests on.
But I do appreciate this opportunity to speak. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for putting all this together. I mean, you've had an amazing year. You've done a lot of work. And I think this is exciting, right? I think we can all see the benefits of putting a little more energy and attention and resources into some of these high return. So I look forward to next year, if not soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, board, that concludes our study session for the meeting. Let's reconvene in the other room. We'll take a 5-minute break and we'll reconvene for the business meeting.
matter of business is to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting, August 2nd, 2022. And I will ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for
I will
tonight's
ask.
meeting of August 2nd, 2022.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll ask for the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Thank you. Next, we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Kirsten Stewart, Associate Director of Communications.
The audience would please rise, if everyone has, and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next, I will turn time over to Jeff Haney and Kirsten Stewart from the Communications Department for some recognitions and start of the school year plans. Can you believe it? We're already talking about start of a school year. Mr. Haney.
Sure, it is hard to believe that we are back for our 14th school year in the Canyon School District. As you all know, we were the first new school district to be created in Utah in nearly a century. And we have started a lot of traditions to make the first day, sometimes even week, or even just the ramp up to the school year as fun as possible. Please remember, tomorrow night is the second annual New Employee Barbecue. And then last year we held it at Corner Canyon High School. We've moved it to Alta High this year. We will roll out the red carpet for our new teachers who started this week with the Canyon School District. We would invite you all to come line that red carpet and give high fives and cheer our new employees to Canyon School District. Just like last year, we have ordered about 500 hot dogs and to serve to all of our new employees. If you don't come, then we're going to have to eat them elsewhere, and I don't want to have any left over. So please come, bring your families. Welcome our new employees to the Canyon School District. You'll see here last year's event. I think that's Mrs. Oakes and Mr. Wrigley waving hello to all of our new teachers. Please come tomorrow. Wave hello to our new teachers. Get to know who they are. Welcome them. We'll have food. We'll have music. What was that? 5:30 is when we start, and then we'll close up about 7 o'clock. We'll have cheerleaders, a drum line. We have a DJ, vendors, local businesses in the area to welcome all of our teachers, to give them an idea of where they can shop and recreate and do fun stuff all around all around our valley. So please join us 5:30, 7 p.m. at Alta High School to welcome the new teachers to Canyon School District. Then maybe I shouldn't say this. Well, I guess August 6th is Canyon's District Night at Rio Tinto Stadium. It's our back to school bash. It's that one last hurrah for the Canyon's District families who want to go to do something together as a family right before school starts. We partner with our professional soccer team located within the boundaries of Canyon School District. They offer discount tickets to all Canyon's District families. A link to those discount tickets can be found on the Canyon's District website, but if you want to go, act quickly. I looked the other day and there are very few tickets left, and they look like a sold out stadium for Canyon's District Night with Real Salt Lake on Saturday, August 6th. That's this Saturday. Then Red Carpet Day is on August 15th. That is the first day of school for the 22-23 school year in the Canyon School District. Per tradition, we are rolling out the red carpet for all of our students. They are the stars of the day after all. At all of our schools in the Canyons District, we're arranging for Real and Monarch players to be at various locations. to hand out pencils and give fist bumps and high fives to all of the kiddos who are returning to school or arriving for the very first time. This first week, actually, it's the end of the first full week of our kindergartners' journey in education. We ask all of our schools to do kindergarten college ready days. They all get their little blue wristband that says, I will be college ready in the year that they will graduate from high school. They do fun activities to look forward to the day when they walk across the graduation stage. It goes with the Canyons District vision and mission of making sure every student graduates from high school, college, and career ready. And then we want to remind you also of the ribbon cuttings that we have planned on August 10th and August 11th. Diamond Ridge and Entrada will move to their new home, the old Bellevue Elementary School. And Glacier Hills Elementary, the newest elementary school, will have its ribbon cutting on August 11th. So please join us at these community events to celebrate either the new home, well, actually new homes of the school communities, the new home for Diamond Ridge and Entrada, and the new home for Glacier Hills, which is the consolidation of the Bellevue and the Edgemont school communities.
Can you remind us the time again?
Yes, Kristen, 5:30? Yes, so 5:30 reception, that's kind of the walkthrough, and then after that, half hour after that is we'll start the ribbon cutting.
Thank you. 4:31.
It's going to be a very busy few weeks, the ramp up to a very exciting school year. So President Tingy, thank you for this time to make these announcements about how we will celebrate back to school in the Canyon School District.
Thank you very much. It's exciting.
It is.
Busy time, fun
Thank
time.
you.
Okay. We've now come to the patron comment portion of our meeting. While not required by law, the board often designates time in meetings to listen to the patrons of the district. Please be aware that patron comment time is limited to residents and taxpayers of Canyons District, students and parents of students, and current employees of the district. Patrons may provide board members with written documents. These documents must be submitted to the board secretary at the meeting over here and emailed to the communications department by noon of the day following the board meeting. Tonight, we've had 4 individuals sign up to address the board. So each of those, actually 3 of them are individual, 1 is a group, but those representing a group will be given 4 minutes and individuals will be given 3 minutes. It's the board's practice to listen and take notes during patron comment time. The Board of Education does not discuss matters that are not on the meeting's agenda, nor engage in public comment on individual students to protect their privacy or employee issues. If a patron wants to comment on a district employee's character, professional competence, or mental or physical health, the board requests that those comments be submitted to the board in writing. However, if the patron determines to verbally comment on those personnel issues, the comments need to be civil and refrain from personal attacks, insults, defamatory, or slanderous comments about an individual. The Board of Education would like to make it clear that critical race theory is not part of the curriculum being used by Canyon School District. There are no plans to incorporate it into the curriculum or instruction in Canyon schools. The Board of Education values input on all sides of issues. To maintain decorum and respect, we ask that those in attendance refrain from applause or other types of demonstrations during the patron comment time, as well as throughout the meeting. First is Stacy Peterson, and then Jessica Smith, and then Jessica Anderson, and then Steve Van Maren. Stacy Peterson.
My name is Stacy Peterson. I'm a mom in Canyons District. I have 2 students. Just at the beginning of this school year, as we are prepared to start, I just would make a request or a plea really to the board and to administration and to the teachers that they involve the parents as much as possible. I know that It matters so much to me when I know what's going on with my children and what's going on in their classrooms. I was remembering when this board was reviewing the Wonders curriculum, and as I was looking at the process, it was outlined in the documents to approve a new curriculum, and at what juncture the parents came into that whole process, and it was really late. And I just felt like it would have been so much of a better process if the parents were involved in the beginning. Now we're looking at this new life skills curriculum coming in, and I don't know if parents have already been involved. I certainly haven't yet, but I don't know if parents were involved in helping create it or review it. Here we are starting school, so I assume we're going forward with it. I would just make a plea that the parents be able to see these lessons before the children see these lessons. I mean, otherwise I feel like I need to opt out because I have no control of what's going on. But if it would be possible, I know we have the technology to be able to see the lessons so that I could talk with my children before they go and have this lesson at school, so they could review it afterwards and be able to say, you know, let's talk about what our family feels about that, or let's talk about what your teacher said. I just think in my mind, there's kind of been some trust that's been lost in kind of what's going on in this black box at the school, since I can't go there all day long and see what's happening. And I think if the parents could be involved more kind of beforehand and as it's happening, that would help. And I was in the study session, I heard Mrs. Nygaard say, you know, some of these parents are going to hear new library books coming in. And I saw that chart, 1,700 new library books. And I like weak need. I'm like, oh no, how do we look at all of those? But I think if we can better work together to serve the students, then everybody will be strengthened and will feel better as a team to support and help the students. So I just would appreciate that if in the back of your minds as you're making decisions, and the teachers and administrators, we want to help, we want to benefit the students, we want to support the teachers and the administration. We just want to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Smith, and then Jessica Anderson.
Thanks for letting me speak tonight. My name is Jessica Smith, and I'm a mother of 4, all here in Canyon School District. So I also watched the presentation that you guys were given in there by Gretchen, and I really appreciated that. But I have some of the same concerns as Stacy. And on slide 17, I think it was, she talked about having an exemplary goal and how that goal would require weeding out over 1,900 books and then purchasing 1,700 books. And so she talked in there how she has hired someone that has 9 years experience, licensed. But my question still is, how are we vetting those books and how are we choosing those books? And I also heard Ms. Nygaard's comments in there saying, you know, the process that we have been using is obviously not working, and we need to have a different process in place, because I know I've spoken to my librarians, and they said that they chose books based on reviews. And so obviously we can't trust all the reviews on the internet. And so my question is, how, is she going to read all those books in their entirety, or can we have volunteers? I would love to volunteer and assist in that process. And I know lots of other people would love to volunteer in that process as well, just to have the best for our children. And then along those lines, I also wanted to bring up just like the overall library book situation. I'm confused as to why our district has continued to keep books on the shelves and in digital platforms that are so unmistakably not age appropriate for children in grades K through 12. Public school is supposed to create a happy, healthy, and safe environment for all its pupils. Continuing to ignore the law and provide books that contain pornographic and explicit behaviors and language is blatantly obvious and intentional. You are providing an environment that is unsafe, and you can do better. We all can do better. This is for our children, your grandchildren. Would you read to your children and grandchildren the words in the book, All Boys Aren't Blue, that another parent read at a board meeting? Of course you wouldn't, because you said it couldn't even be read in the board meeting. And this is wrong, like plain and simple. Pornography is pornography. And allowing these books to come into our schools and then remain on the shelves after knowing what they contain is grooming our children and is illegal. Again, wrong is wrong, and you are on the wrong for keeping these books on the shelves. They are not appropriate. If you would not watch or read it with your family, children, or grandchildren, then it shouldn't be offered to you to mind. Please stand up and do what is right. We deserve more from our elected officials. We entrusted the safety of our children to you. Have the courage to choose our children and get these pornographic and inappropriate books off of our shelves and digital platforms. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Anderson and then Steve Van Maren.
I'm Jessica Anderson. I have 3 children attending schools in our district. A few months ago, I addressed the board regarding pornographic material that has been found in books in schools in our district. I read an excerpt from the book All Boys Aren't Blue that graphically depicts incestuous sexual relations between 2 teen boy cousins. The book contained more sexually graphic scenes with even more explicit detail than what I read that day. It appeared to stir shock in the board based on Nancy's attempts to silence me and Mont's questioning of how this book got on the shelves in the first place. I left the meeting with hope and faith that the appropriate action would be taken by implementing policy that not only allows for books to be challenged and removed, but also policy that prevents pornography from ever entering our schools through library books, books assigned in the classroom, or any other means. What followed were ridiculous claims that I am a book burner. Quite the contrary. I am a lover of free speech who believes that if you want to read filth, you have the freedom to read filth. Go to your local bookstore and buy all the porn that you want, whatever the cost to your soul may be, but I will not stand by and allow you to use my tax dollars to provide pornography to my innocent children. The policy that has been implemented since is insufficient and lacking, to say the least. How is me being able to challenge a few books a year acceptable to you as board members and to us as parents? There should be undoubtedly be policy made that provides a clear way for preventing pornography from ever infiltrating the systems that are shaping the minds of our beautiful children. Studies have shown time and time again that the harmful effects of are debilitating for those who are exposed and become addicted to pornography. And yet I have heard from countless librarians, teachers, parents, and students debating that the pornography is justified by the book's overall literary value. You have to be kidding me, right? How genius of Satan to deceive in this way. This is a black and white issue. Under no circumstances is pornography ever to be made accessible to my child at school. I urge the board to do everything in their power to implement better policy that ensures the safety of my children while they are in your care. If not, I and other parents are prepared to follow the lead of parents in the Alpine School District where lawsuits were filed. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Van Maren.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Board. Steve Van Maren, tax-paying resident. Kids are out of school. One grandson, great-grandson coming up. I'm not going to speak on content. I'm going to speak on process. I'm so disappointed that the libraries are not open during the summer, at least on a limited basis. How can you practice football in the, reading in the summer without a practice field? 10 minutes to read in a week or to find a book. I'm sorry, something needs to happen. Can you please find some money to support more library time? Before and after school was suggested. How about during the registration period? I don't know, I guess everything starts early, but maybe during the registration period in early August, let students come in early and find some books to get started. Just general frustration with the limited access. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our patron comment time, and we appreciate all of those who have come to the meeting and have taken the time to address the board. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and comments with us. Next on the agenda are the consent items, and I will ask for a motion to on the consent items. And in making that motion, will you please read each of the items listed?
I can make a motion for the consent agenda to be approved, which will include item A, approval of minutes for July 12th, 2022. Item B, approval of hire and termination reports. Item C, approval of purchasing bids. Item D, approval of student overnight travel. And I would like to pull off item E for further discussion, so that would not be included.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have 2 seconds.
I yield my second to Mom.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Millerberg. Thank you. Okay, any discussion to the motion? To this motion, which is pulling that one off. Okay. Okay. All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. That motion passes. And now, Mrs. Oaks, so we pulled off item 7E for further discussion, and I believe Mr. Millerberg has a question or comment on that item.
This is a tried and true and tested argument I make every time we want to change these, but and I'm sure most of you could probably recite it without me saying it. But when we approve our schedule for board meetings every year, I then plan the rest of my life around that schedule. The proposed change will make it so I would not be able to attend the proposed meeting. I believe it moved it to November 29th. I will not be able to attend if the board chooses to do that.
Okay, thank you. And just kind of a reminder, background for the board, we do approve our meeting schedules about a year and a half or 2 in advance. And it was just noted that at this particular time, we put 2 meetings back to back in December. So yeah, so we're just kind of bringing it forwards for your attention before we get to December and notice that, and then talk about it. And as Mr. Millerberg had noted, that he would not be able to attend if we did move it to the 29th. So any other thoughts? We can leave it as scheduled, or we can make the change, but that's kind of the background. Mr. Wrigley.
I thought we also had some discussion that we wanted to give some more time in regards to the holiday. Wasn't there some issue in November?
I think what you're pointing out is November 29th would be the Tuesday following the Thanksgiving recess.
Yeah, which gave more time. Whatever.
Any thoughts, Mrs. Nybauer?
I just have a thought. Sometime, I do think it was a good catch. Sometimes when we have meetings within a week apart, we'll have an assignment that the board asks for some of the administrators here at the district, and that's a hard turnaround time, just a week. We're talking about, I hear there's maybe some question. It wasn't the, I wasn't the one that created this possible change, but when I saw it, I noted that before our December dates, we had 1 week right after the other rather than the every other week, which I assumed was why we added the 29th. Isn't that what you just stated, Nancy?
Just trading December 6th for November 29th.
Yes. So we wouldn't have 2 weeks in a row in December. So I do think that makes a lot of sense. I understand, Mont, your frustration with your schedule, but I do think that does make sense rather than have it, within a week of each other.
And my argument is not that it doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
My argument is simply that we approve this, and I think board members need to have confidence in the schedule that we approve. So when they do go out and plan the rest of their life, they don't feel like they're a slacker for not being able to do that. I am required by law to keep my license to practice to have continuing education. I schedule it the week after Thanksgiving every year. And so therefore I am totally unable to do that. And I guess maybe it's a good get that somebody finally found it. But I think it's unfair to tell people they've got time they can use for their personal use, and then on fairly short notice, eliminate that.
Other thoughts or comments? Mrs. Arnold?
I don't see a need to move it either. That puts 3 board meetings in November and 1 in December, but that's what we were trying to avoid to begin with when we had the other discussion. So I don't see a reason that we need to move it.
I would favor canceling it.
Any?
Can I make a
any
comment?
thoughts?
Can I make a comment? Can you guys hear me?
Could we do that and only have the one meeting in December rather than 2 back to back? What about our schedule the state regulated schedule we have of certain things we have to talk about? Would that make a conflict for December at all?
I think it's not governed by state regulation. I think it is up to us.
I just mean of our, you know how we have a rotating schedule of the topics we go through at certain times of the year. Does that mess us up with anything if we were to eliminate the December one and the November 29th?
No, that would not.
Thank you.
Mrs. Oaks?
So just to verify, my recollection, but now I'm looking at my calendar and it says something different. Are we still actually having a board meeting on the night of the election on November 1st? I thought traditionally in the past we don't. Is that correct?
So
or no?
this year election night is November 8th.
Oh, you're correct. You're right. It's the week after. So we would then have 3 in November, 1 in December. I personally am in favor of it. I think any meeting that I can eliminate in the month of December is extraordinarily helpful because that's a crazy time for a lot of people, but I can totally appreciate your point. So
Other thoughts? Mrs. Nybauer?
I don't want to have a meeting that Mont can't attend, especially when he's so responsible about the schedule. And if we don't have any pressing need to do those 2 meetings back to back in December, I'd just as soon eliminate November 29th and do the 1 in December if the other board members are in favor of that.
Is that a motion?
Mrs. Schill would like to make a comment, and I think Mr. Wrigley has a question.
I just have a question of Leon and our superintendent in regards to what effect that might have on any of our purchase orders or anything else you need to get done during that time.
So we would go from, under this proposal, we go from November 15th to basically December 13th, 4 weeks. With the holiday in there, we can make that work. Yeah. I don't know. I want to, if Rick wants to. Go back.
So let's see, Mrs. Schill's trying to make a comment, but we're not hearing her. So let's see if the IT, are you, Mrs. Schill, are you unmuted? Okay, I
will
don't know
make a
if we can do something I'd like to give her a chance to make a comment, but I'm not quite sure how we can do that. Okay, so while we're figuring that out, I think Mr. Milliberg has another thought.
Well, we're just kind of talking amongst ourselves here that we could cancel the one on the 13th and have the one on the 6th. And that does away with the concern about going all the way from the middle of November till December without having one, from the 15th to the 6th.
Okay, that's an idea. Let's see. So I've just called Mrs. Schill on the phone. Let's see if, okay, Mrs. Schill?
Yes. I was going to actually propose what Mont just said, that we meet on December 6th and just have that one meeting in December.
Okay. Okay.
So I just had the same idea he had. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. If we were to do that, then we could just keep the 13th on the books, and then if it gets closer and we don't need to conduct business, we could cancel it. I mean, it's kind of hard because the last couple of years we've almost needed every meeting and then some. So I don't know. So should we for now keep it as is? Yes.
Not alter the schedule at all. No alteration to the schedule.
Just the 6th and the 13th.
6th and the 13th. Okay. All right. So, so procedurally, if that, unless someone wants to make a motion to make the change to the schedule, we can just move on. Okay. No motion. All right. Thank you. That concludes the consent agenda. And now we'll turn time over to Dr. Amber Roderick Landward, Director of Instructional Supports, for the Early Learning Plan Annual Report for the 2022-2023 school year.
Thank you, President Tingy. Good evening, board. This time of year, we get to talk about early learning. And before I jump into that, I just want to give a shout out to all of our elementary teachers. Today concluded our 2-day English Language Arts curriculum training that we've been doing all summer. So as of today, we have trained nearly every single elementary teacher between June and today. They have all come with incredibly great attitudes, very open-minded, and extreme excitement for all of the new curriculum. I spoke with a number of teachers today who expressed that they were overwhelmed and excited and ready to dive in. So I just want to shout out again all of the learning that they've done over the summer before their contract has even started. And I'm just really grateful for their dedication. And since we're talking about early learning, I thought it would be appropriate to share some gratitude. So I want to give a little bit of background about the early learning program. This, I think, is the 4th or 5th, maybe 6th year that the state has required that local boards start approving these plans. As you know, every single year during the legislative session, this program gets bigger and bigger, so has encompassed a number of bills over those handful of years. And now the early learning program, which was formerly the literacy program, it has moved to the early learning program because it now includes math. So I wanted to just highlight a couple of things in your copy on board docs. You do have some hyperlinks up there in the top next to the title. You've got the link to the actual code that encompasses the entire learning plan. USB also released an early learning technical manual earlier this year, and it includes all of the previous state legislation requirements that have gone into this particular plan, with the exception of the current legislative session. So I imagine that will be updated, but that just gives a lot of additional background. The overall purpose of the learning program is to improve early literacy and early mathematics and classroom instruction and student outcomes for kindergarten through 3rd grade. The requirements of that plan and the funding attached to it requires a specific plan that's submitted to both the local school board as well as the state school board. There are state-specific requirements for literacy and math, and then there are also local goal requirements for literacy and math as well. The state also has outlined through legislation and now Utah code specific implementation requirements around using evidence-based curriculum, interventions and specific assessment and other progress monitoring requirements, as well as put in place a system of support for LEAs that do not achieve their goals. I wanted to draw your attention also to some of the implications from Senate Bill 127 that was passed during this legislative session, because it was the most comprehensive additions to the early learning program that we've seen in the last 5 years. The summary of those implications as well as the bill are also linked in the top of the slide for your reference. But the new requirements that I wanted to highlight this year include the requirement of a diagnostic reading assessment for all students who are below benchmark This has actually been a practice in Canyons for about 9 years now, so we were already meeting this requirement. Also, the requirement to progress monitor students who are falling below benchmark. What that accountability looks like, the state has not defined. Again, this is a practice that has already been in place in Canyons for a number of years. They also have very specific requirements for evidence-based versus evidence-informed materials, particularly for literacy, that include organized curriculum that aligns to the science of reading. Again, something that's already been in place both in our curriculum policy and in our practice in Canyons for a number of years, but they do have even a panel that will be reviewing and approving curriculum that is outlined in our plan. They also embedded in this bill the legislation around continuing the professional learning in the reading of science, which is what we've been participating in this year in the Letters Initiative that you've all heard quite a lot about, and added a component for professional learning and change management for elementary administrators. And then finally, the implication that impacts our schools is that USBE has included the appointment of literacy coaches to support the lowest performing schools in the state. We have one school that falls into that category, and that is Midvale Elementary. And so they were appointed an additional coach. USBE did find that when they posted these positions, they had trouble getting people to apply because most of the districts had higher pay scales than the state office did. And so then they changed the implementation structure and are now just giving the districts who require the additional coach because of the school's performance. We can hire the coach, they just have to approve them, and they get to provide some directives in how they are utilized in the school. So that is new, and like I said, some of the biggest additions that we've seen to the early learning program in the last couple of years. What you also have in board docs is a copy of the actual plan that USBE requires. USBE also opens up the opportunity for LEAs to submit the plan for pre-approval. So that has been done, and the state, or the plan that you have on board docs, has been pre-approved by USBE pending your approval. There are 3 sections that you'll note on the plan. The first is for early literacy that requires us to outline our evidence-based curriculum, the assessments, and a brief description of our tier 2 and tier 3 interventions and the progress monitoring of those. And then similar for early mathematics, the piece that is different in section B is that there's also the requirement in talking through the specific integration of some of the essential components of math. I would anticipate next year that we have additional requirements in early mathematics around more evidence based, as well as some specific state requirements in terms of growth goals. And then finally, section C has the local goals. You'll notice that we are required to have 1 goal in literacy, 1 goal in mathematics, and then we can choose to have a 3rd goal if we would like. The requirements for the plan are that we meet both the state target, which is at least 60% of our students in kindergarten through 3rd grade, making progress. I'm forgetting the term all of a sudden, sorry. Making basically typical progress or better. Sorry, it's left my mind for a minute, but we do not have that goal yet for mathematics. Did I see a question? Okay. So in previous years, I've shared with you how we've done in our goals to date before getting to the new goals in the plan. So I'll walk through these really quickly. You have our trends here, but this is the state required growth goal for literacy. And again, the requirement is that 60% of all students make typical or better growth. And that's all based on Acadience, which is a required assessment for kindergarten through 3rd grade. Last year, we did meet that goal with 67% of our students kindergarten through 3rd grade making that typical or better growth. Our local goal was that CSD will increase the percentage of kindergarten students who are at or above benchmark by 2% from the middle of the year to the end of the year. You'll notice last year we did not meet that goal. We had a decrease of 4% from middle of the year to the end of the year. And then in 1st grade, our goal was to increase the percentage of students who are at or above benchmark from the beginning of the year to the end of the year by 22%. And you'll notice we fell short of that goal as well. So we did not meet 2 of our 3 required goals, which puts us in improvement. As we look to next year, our literacy goals, we chose to have an additional goal in literacy, given the status of things for the last couple of years. USBE also has a very specific way that they would like us to calculate our goal based on those trends, so that we're not setting goals that are not attainable, but ambitious, yet also realistic. And so I've got that formula listed there. So our goal for the upcoming school year will be that CSD will increase the percentage of kindergarten students who are scoring at or above benchmark by 2% as measured by correct letter sounds and Acadians. And then also a similar goal for first grade that we had this year, and that we will increase by 22%. The strategies that we've outlined in our goal are to focus on the implementation of our evidence-based curriculum for explicit phonemic awareness and phonics instruction that you all approved last year. Continue with supporting the letters professional development for teachers in the science of reading, and to continue to provide the ongoing coaching in the science of reading skills. For math, we hope to increase the percentage of our first grade.
you a question before you move on
course.
to math? So going back to letters, last year we had a difficult time getting subs for them. And we stopped working with the 4th through 6th grade teachers, correct? They stopped taking letters. for
They
the time
actually
being.
never participated in the training, but they did participate in the online modules for the schools that requested that additional training.
Okay, so they did the online modules, but they did not do the training, the all-day training.
Mhm.
So this year, are you going to have them do the all-day training because they do have the modules done? And what is our plan for, I know this is, our plan, but what is the plan for the teachers if we don't have subs once more to do what we need to do?
Very good question. So with regards to the 4th and 5th grade options, so those schools that requested to have their 4th and 5th grade teachers also participate in letters training, we did propose an option for them to support their teachers in getting that training after school, so that we didn't have to ask for additional subs because we were unsure whether or not our sub pool would increase. So continuing with year 2 for our kindergarten and 3rd grade teachers, we are hopeful that the sub pool will increase. If it doesn't, I would anticipate that we will be in a similar situation that we were this year, where many of us were out subbing and supporting the schools, as well as the continued reliance on our emergency subs and community to help us with that volunteering.
So if they're doing it after school, are we paying them their salary stipend, or are we paying them the hourly professional development stipend?
That is a really good question. I would have to double check that. I can't remember where the principals landed on as we were working together on that proposal.
And did they get the
I can find out for
stipend?
you. They did get the stipend for participating in the online modules. That was the same as the kindergarten through 3rd grade teachers.
Okay, and then we just don't know how they got paid for doing it after school.
They haven't participated in that yet. So that is something that is on the table right now for them to participate in those schools, again, where the principal requested that they participate.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So is now a good time if there are questions about the literacy portion of the plan? Okay. Mrs. Nybauer?
Okay, a few questions. It looks like a really great goal, the early literacy for first grade students who are scoring at or above benchmark is growing by 22%. Is the goal. My only question is, in the duration of a year, what is the average growth? Because they do grow in the duration of a year. I'm just wondering what's the what is our average right now? Now we're asking for 22%. Like what was it last year for first graders?
So this is the trend that we've had for the last handful of years. So last year, we grew 17%, and you can see what that has looked like.
Okay, so
in
we're
the previous
looking at a
4 years.
5% increase.
Mhm.
Okay, and then what about the mathematics? Do you have a table for the mathematics as well? Because they're on a different slide. It's hard to, the early mathematics goal we have is increasing by 5%. What has it been historically?
I don't remember that off the top of my head. I can look that up for you. I did not include that because this is the first year that USBE has required the goal.
Yeah.
So this is our baseline goal for both the state and how they'll be monitoring that.
Okay, thanks.
But
so
I
much.
do have that trend for you. I can send to you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Mr. Wrigley?
I have just a couple of comments. I'm glad to see we're doing diagnostic reading assessments. Does any of that pick up dyslexia during that period of time on our kids? Because I know a lot of times between them, you won't catch it by third and they're gone by the time we get in sixth or seventh or high school. So that should be picking it up then.
Correct. And our screening assessment, Acadiance reading, is a good indicator of that as well, because remember, dyslexia is defined as a general difficulty in reading abilities. And so that's a really good first step, is to use that screener, and then being able to apply additional diagnostics that really focus on phonological awareness and phonics allow us to go even deeper to identify where those deficits may be lying.
Good. I mean, I know we've had several parents over the years concerned about that. The other question is, there was a report that came out yesterday, I think it was, national report on 3 to 5 years delay in education due to COVID. Do you think this has affected any of the numbers? I mean, the kindergarten and others, and how is that affecting our third grade as we go into this literacy goals and moving forward? Is that having an effect on your goals and stuff?
It absolutely is having an effect. I think the good news is we are fortunate in our district with our incredible teachers and the work that they've done to just have quality instruction, and now adding even more evidence-based curriculum. I don't think that we are seeing some of the dips that a lot of other districts are, but certainly the amount of time that students have spent out of school, the amount of time that our teachers have had to spend out of school for both health, and then of course some of the state initiatives have certainly impacted some of that.
Yeah, I assume it would affect maybe even the kindergartners as far as their emotional wellness and ready to learn.
Correct.
That may be why we had sort of a dip last year. Okay, I'm hoping this year, as we put this together and all the great things we're doing, that we'll probably see us move. We didn't have as much drop as the rest of the nation, which is a good thing to hear.
It is a good thing to hear. And I agree, Steve, I think that a lot of the things that we have in place, we will see some growth. And I also think that with the experience that we've had in the pandemic, it is going to take time. So I think we have to be mindful of that as we move forward, and just know that everybody's doing the best that they can.
Okay, thank you.
So we talked.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Nyberg has one other question. I was going to wait to the end, but Steve brought it up. Last year we talked about, and you may remember my concern for being able to detect dyslexia early on. And I know we've had this practice of interventions for reading disabilities, but I shared with you some families from our very district that never did get a diagnosis, and then around age 10, looking for outside resources. And I do also, I have recently spoken to families that are also looking outside of Canyons with other school programs, because they felt there would be stronger ability to diagnose and for reading interventions. So we've talked about this before, but these kids that have reading disabilities, sometimes we're saying, you're running this race, warm up and just keep running faster, but maybe what they need is a prosthetic limb. And we just keep saying, run faster, but the finish line keeps moving as the standards go up. And so what are we doing different? Because I know this has been an issue in the past, even though it has been our practice to do diagnostic. What are we doing different to address that, to try to be sure that we are catching kids early on that are manifesting signs of dyslexia as far as intervention goes, and really being able to get a diagnosis for the families? Do we have a referral system? What are we doing? Because I know you said we did have room to grow. So tell me about what we're doing differently than we have in the past.
Well, I think some of the things, again, that I would highlight that have been working for a large majority of our students, particularly ones who are falling below benchmark, are our early warning systems by identifying students through screening and additional diagnostics, as well as at the elementary level in particular, they have had professional learning communities in place for a number of years where they can continue to talk about students' progress, as well as student support teams where they can talk about individual students who continue to not make progress with the expertise of people who have math, reading, or whatever the challenge might be that's presenting with that particular child to be able to put additional interventions in place. So I think those things have all been really strong systems. I think there's always room to improve the tightness of those systems and how we're collecting data to really make sure that we're looking at our students at all angles, really, right? I think moving forward, some of the things that will be different that will help us catch kids even more are the evidence-based curriculum that you all approved last year with Wonders and 95%. It's one of the strongest, most systematic, and very targeted phonemic awareness and phonics program, and rigorous in that regard that we could have adopted. So I think that prevention piece is going to be much stronger moving forward than we have had in the past. Built into those particular programs include some pretty detailed progress monitoring around those skills. So teachers will have even more data at their fingertips to be able to really catch some of those particular pieces around phonological processing and awareness, which is where, again, the root of dyslexia lies. So I think those pieces will be different. We also have all of our schools now aligned with the core program. We have a tier 2 intervention program also from 95% group that has that alignment that will be able to better support filling in those gaps when we do identify the kiddos who are not meeting those benchmarks, or who during those ongoing assessments that they'll be administering this year will be able to provide immediate support, which I think will be really helpful. So all of those systems that we've had in place, we just continue to get tighter and better aligned. And I'm really excited about the upcoming year for that reason.
I know I had a good discussion with Alice Peck and Susan Edwards about a year and a half ago regarding some things that the state of Texas does in their public schools with helping guide through that diagnosis and interventions. And that may be another thing to explore is I know there were some materials that I read that were really helpful for me. So something to think about maybe.
Mrs. Oakes? In follow up to that same question, sorry, you're going to get more questions about disabilities. That's something I care a lot about as well. So I know that we have curriculums and systems in place. I'm curious what the training is with our elementary teachers, our early ed teachers, and then, I saw Wendy Dow sitting down. I know that we've also kind of talked in study session before also about the importance of making sure that in IPLCs of the secondary level that there's discussion with teachers about how to be able to recognize those things. What is the current counsel or training for teachers across the board when they suspect or they're seeing data? I mean, are they encouraged to pass them on? Do they understand clearly what the process is, how to be able to help that child?
I believe that they do. So again, we're fortunate at the elementary level, all of our teachers, kindergarten through 3rd grade, and then a number of our 4th and 5th grade teachers who have had advanced training in the science of reading, which letters is focused at its root, again, in a lot of those signs of dyslexia. So I think that we have even more understanding now than we did before last year at the elementary level. All of our teachers who teach reading and some of our ELA teachers at the middle school have had the opportunity to participate in some extensive training as well around the science of reading, which again includes some of those indicators around dyslexia. Because we have a pretty solid student support team practices in place in all of our levels, that again is a great process that teachers use to identify students who need more support. Often when students get referred to those teams, they are asking for more support in gathering information. And so that's when they, again, solicit the support of the expertise that they have access to both at the building level and at the district level to come in and provide more assessments or observation, whether it be around reading, whether it be around math, whether it be around language development, behavior, all of those pieces. And across all of our departments, we provide supports for the schools in gathering that information so that we can make the best determination about what the schools needs. Sometimes that's additional intervention and support. Sometimes it's looking about whether or not there's a presence of a disability and whether or not they need specialized instruction that would warrant an IEP. All of those conversations are occurring in that student support process.
Thank you. Let's hear about math goals.
So math, we kind of started to talk about this, looking again at our baseline year and our goal focusing on first grade students and hoping to grow from beginning of the year to the end of the year by 5% on the measure called advanced quantity discrimination, which is part of the Acadience math suite, which is also a state required assessment. The strategies that you'll see outlined in that goal also focus on continued support to implement our evidence-based Tier 1 curriculum for mathematics, and then ongoing coaching to be able to provide those just-in-time supports and make sure that our Tier 1 is robust there. So that is our starting point. Questions?
Questions, anyone? On the math portion? Mrs. Nybar?
I have one other thought. Could we consider possibly forming a small committee with parents whose children have diagnosed reading disabilities? Because this is something I've heard a lot from a lot of parents actually, is a hope that there can be a little more help with diagnosis and earlier intervention. And that might be really helpful because a lot of times when you're a parent of a child that has that struggle, you then kind of become an expert. You read about it and you try to find all the resources. And I just can't help but think that there may be more we could be doing here as far as the diagnosis.
That's a great idea.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, I just have a couple of thoughts. I think this is great, and I'm glad that the state has put this process in place, that we look at this every year and that we become more targeted and intentional in our efforts. And you know, even though we didn't meet 2 of those 3 goals, I'm glad that we're saying that, right? We're admitting it and we're redoubling our efforts for that. One thought too that I had is this spring, every spring as we read through the school community council, their trust lands and TSSP plans, quite often they have goals along these same lines. So how much is this plan communicated out to the school community council so they're aware of what these goals are, what these measures are, and things like that? I just think that might be something to consider for a kind of alignment of effort, if possible. I mean, just not that we would ask the SECs to make these goals, but so that they're aware this is what the district is doing.
I think that's a really great point, Nancy. And I know a couple of isolated situations where principals have brought these particular goals to the table, but it's certainly not something that we have required. So I don't think it's something that's happening across the board, but I think that that's a really good point. We typically, once the plan has been approved by you all and submitted to the state, we share these goals with our elementary principals and we have lots of dialogue with them. But I think that's a really good point to bring it into the public view at the school as well.
And I was thinking just as a piece of information and data for the councils to consider as they do their work.
I think that's a great idea.
And then also this is for the board because we do need to approve this plan. And if no one objects, are we okay to bring this back at our next meeting? Because there is a September 1st deadline for us to take action on this. Can we bring this back on consent? Everyone okay with that? Yes, Mr. Millerberg.
Help me better understand the process that takes place. You test the kids beginning of year. You test them end of year.
Beginning, middle, and end.
So the teacher has no other benchmark really to look at other than middle of year. They don't know where they are as far as attaining goal?
No, those are
How
just.
do they track to where they know if they're being successful in reaching the
Really
goal?
good question. That's a very fair question, Mont, and I'm glad that you brought it up so that we can clarify. So the benchmark assessments are like taking your temperature 3 times a year to really see how we're doing with the general health of reading and math. And so those just give us an indication of risk and growth. And then our teachers are collecting data every single day on the progress of their students in literacy and math, whether that's with ongoing assignments that they're collecting feedback, specific assessments that they've developed individually or with their team. They have access to assessments within their curriculum programs, progress monitoring assessments that are also directly tied to the benchmark assessments. So they're certainly not short on data to be able to assess how their students are doing and to be able to make those adjustments with their instruction regularly with their intervention groups. And they do a pretty good job of that.
In plain English, when they finished 4% below goal, that was no surprise.
It shouldn't have been.
They could see that coming from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. They knew they were running behind schedule.
I wouldn't say that they knew it from the beginning of the year that that was going to be the case. I think that all teachers are really skilled and hope that what they're putting in place is going to increase the skills of all of their students. Again, this year we had many challenges with students. I mean, I don't have
2
to.
years of them.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have to explain to this group, but I wouldn't say that they assume that because the students are behind in the fall, that they're also going to be behind in the spring. Unfortunately, that has been our trend, which signals to us as a system that we need to figure out how to tighten some things up to be able to support those students who aren't making progress.
So at least by mid-year, they knew they were behind the 8 ball.
Correct,
Okay.
if not sooner.
Okay, and any other thoughts or questions? Okay, we will look to bring this plan back on consent agenda. So, and as you mentioned earlier, the actual form that the plan is filled out that will be submitted to the state board, right, is on board docs, and we'll plan that for next board meeting then. Great. Okay. Thank you. Next on the agenda, item 8B, information on middle school world and U.S. history textbook. I will turn time back over to Dr. Amber Roderick Landward, Director of Instructional Supports.
Hello again. On board docs, I outlined a document that hopefully answered the questions that you had during the last board meeting regarding the social studies text. So I highlighted the background of when we first adopted the text 9-10 years ago now, and how that came into play with the reconfiguration, and then the rationale for moving forward with the licenses across all 8 of our middle schools and the 6-year agreement so that we could ensure that access for a longer period of time. I also outlined the specific access to the demo accounts so that we could make sure that you had access to those, as well as any parents who wanted it before their students were able to access this fall. But that will also be an access point that will remain for them through their student login and through Canvas. So at this point, I will just turn the time over to you all if there are any additional questions or clarification that I can provide.
Questions, board? Mrs. Nybauer?
Thank you so much for including that access. That's fantastic and so great to involve the parents to be able to look at that. I just had one quick question. I noticed that if changes to content are made, they're done over the summer. And in our last meeting, I think you were saying it's been a few years since we did the original lens of looking to adopt. And I was just wondering, have there been changes to the content in the summers and specifically this last summer? Did we get a report of that?
So the curriculum from when we adopted it originally to what we have now, the platform itself has actually changed significantly, because when we first adopted in 10 years ago, the digital access was essentially a PDF of the textbook. That's what the digital access was back then. It's obviously evolved. It's much more interactive and gives teachers more options to embed the digital tool within their instruction. So those pieces are different. The actual content, the biggest changes, we figured it was about 90% the same, and the 10% that is different was in two ways. One, in the lesson structure, we, in the original purchase, there was a separate ancillary resource called the Inquiry Journal that has now been made part of the lesson structure instead of a supplement, which made the teachers very happy because they ended up creating their own anyway as the resource continued to get used and used over time. So that's one of the big changes to the content of the lesson structure. The other is that there were additional resources for primary sources that teachers were having to bring in that were recommended in the textbook, like a digital copy, say, of the Constitution, for example, of the whole Constitution. Those are now actually part of the resource so that the teachers don't have to find them and embed them themselves. So those are the two biggest changes.
Okay, so no changes we have to worry about as far as age appropriateness or propaganda or anything like that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Oaks?
So just to clarify, I mean, because I've had a lot of similar questions. So with regard to the online content, how does this differ from some of what we saw that was problematic with Second Step? Can you clarify that?
I can, and that's a really fair and good question that I think we should clarify. So first off, I want to highlight that the publishers that we go through for our curriculum adoptions that are district-wide in core content areas are generally very big publishing companies. They publish more than just one resource. They publish extensive resources. They have very big staff. They have a lot of curriculum developers. They have a lot of educators on staff. They're very familiar, not just with the content, but all of the pedagogy and pieces around best practices and all of the contents that they're developing curriculum. So I think that's a really big piece. So when we are looking to purchase curriculum from any of these large vendors, they also have the resources to customize and meet the demands of a lot of school districts that are our size. And they're also, they make a lot of money. And so it's in their interest to respond to our feedback, but also not to be changing things. So I know that we've used the term dynamic curriculum with online resources a lot at board meetings. And I'm not sure that that's the most accurate way to describe our digital resources for these district-wide adoptions, because they aren't really dynamic. They're not providing a lot of ongoing changes to the content. Most of it is in, like I mentioned before, usability and functionality of the resources. The other thing that the advantage of these large publishing companies have is when they're developing curriculum, the things that they're embedding in terms of links or additional resources, they own or have purchased copyright rights to the material. So they are not taking kids out of the curriculum. They don't want us to leave their curriculum because they want us to continue to be their clients, right? So all of the links that are included in the curriculum, they're not even really links. They're links to another part of the program that is interactive in terms of the tool. So I hope that that helps. So that's why I said, I don't know that I'd really call it dynamic, because we're not linking to websites that we don't have control over, that the publishing company doesn't have control over, to be able to keep the product what it was when we purchased it.
Okay, so point one, parents can review any changes. It's available to them at all times to be able to view.
Correct.
Point two, it does not go to outside sources. It's all embedded within it. It's not taking students to other, off on other tangents outside of what that particular publishing company is already decided is part of the curriculum. Okay, and
generally speaking, yes.
Okay, and so how when we're talking about the policy we have with regard to online components of curriculum, have we followed that with this? Is that, is it being transparent enough for the public to be able to see at any given moment that they can be aware of? Have you ever had something come up with this particular curriculum for the secondary level that's raised an eyebrow or that's been concerning? Is it ever something that would reach the level of the board that we need to make a decision on or review publicly?
Really good question. So the textbook to date is not something that we have received any questions of concern about at our level. for even those schools who have been using the digital licenses for the last couple of years, to my knowledge, they have not received any questions or complaints either.
And if people had those questions or concerns, what would be the best way for them to approach you? I mean, do they go through the principal? Do they approach ISD? Like, what's the best way
So I think
to address that?
the recommendation, if I understand that actually came from the board that has been published in a lot of our communications, is that we always want to encourage the interaction between the parents and the teachers, because they're really the most active partners in their kids' education. And so having the conversation there first to determine what was seen that they had concern about, the purpose behind it, whether or not it was justified or not, and then continuing that conversation if necessary with the principal and then our department to be able to look at those resources and make any action that needs to be made at that time. Mhm.
Okay, another comment, Mrs. Nybauer?
Thank you. I'm just wondering, you've said there isn't anything offensive. You feel very comfortable with the content changes. How hard would it be, though, also just to have an update in our bulletin when we're reapproving curriculums with any updates, just to know and have a little report sent to us so we can have a detailed list of what the content changes are? We are elected, we're accountable. It would just feel very comforting for me to know. And that way I would know there would be a thoroughness to make sure that we don't have any additional content that people may find objection to or feel that it's very subjective or can be offensive to maybe certain values.
I think we can certainly look at what that would look like in terms of an annual update and how we might want to provide ongoing updates and information. I think something to we'll just have to figure out what that would look like. Something to keep in mind, any curriculum that we adopt, we are not using all of it the entire year. It's humanly impossible for a teacher to use every single resource that comes with a textbook, especially now with all of the ancillary materials that come with a textbook and a program. It would just be impossible. So knowing that even when we adopt a curriculum or a textbook with the digital resources, we are not using all of it always. That's why we have the instructional guides where we highlight and prioritize the parts of the resource that we think make the most sense for teaching the standards. And then teachers, again, use their professional judgment based on their students and their students' needs to be able to continue to access. So given those things, I think we can still figure out a process of how we would want to include a regular update with any things that we learn about updates to the curriculum.
That'd be great. And just with the content, the extra links, the
Usability things,
Constitution,
you don't care
usability
about
stuff,
those?
we don't need, but just the content.
You don't want the bug fix memos that you get like your iPhone.
Yeah, but that would be fantastic. And I think we've learned some things, and it doesn't hurt to have as much transparency and
Agreed.
accountability as we can.
Yep.
Thank
And
you.
along those lines, again, I just want to reiterate that the benefit of having these digital tools are that any family can look at all of the components of the curriculum at any time. And so it is always available for our families to be able to view.
Okay, and just a follow-up thought on that, as in our policy and the exhibits that accompany the policy, if we were to incorporate something along those lines, like an update, that might be the process to go about figuring out how to do that, is through the policy.
To add
just the idea of a regular update to the board would be included there, I think. So policy committee, we can talk about that, or maybe you can make some recommendations to policy committee of what would be reasonable.
I think that's a great place to start.
Okay. Thank you. Superintendent, did you have a comment?
Clarine, did you want to go?
Clarine, did you? Sorry, I didn't see.
Well, no, I was just thinking, usually when we get a textbook, the textbook stays the same as what my brain was saying, and then you have the supplementary material that comes with it. It usually stays the same. I haven't seen them change a text, if it's a real textbook, haven't seen them really change the information in the textbook. Even when they updated the math, which took them years to update, it was still the same problems. All they did was add some color and some graphics in it. But I'm also thinking that the teachers are amazing, and I would hope that as they're going through it the first year, or any year, they would be more than willing to call ISC and explain to them that there's some pieces in there that they don't know are what we should be doing or shouldn't be doing, and that we don't deviate from that textbook, because that's what really gets us in trouble. But I don't know. I was just wondering how much it would change in my brain, but.
Yeah, that's a fair point, Clarine, and I don't believe that the content really changes all that much. Most of the changes, like I've mentioned, are in terms of functionality of the digital tool. That said, everybody makes mistakes. So often there are typos. Sometimes, unfortunately, even in our math texts, we've caught wrong answers in the answer key to math problems. So those would be, I would still consider those content changes, because that's not necessarily functionality, but that is a content change that is necessary. Those types of things.
Thank you. Superintendent? Oh, wait, sorry. Another one?
I just was going to say that social studies and history, even before they were online, I was a middle school teacher. Those contents do change. Math, not as frequently, but social studies and history certainly does. And they do try to update those with current events after it's been a few years. So I think we have more of that in those books than like a math. That's all.
Thank you. Superintendent?
Yeah, thank you, Amber. Appreciate all your work on this. Just two comments. One is lessons learned, from second steps. And I think first, and I appreciate you've addressed this, but our eyes are on dynamic curriculum. And I think that's been a wake-up call for everybody in education. I think, this shift and just the political divide that our country is experiencing over the last few years, I think across our country, the reality is that this has got to just be something that's automatic, that our eyes are on dynamic curriculum, and that we're paying close attention, and you're doing that. And secondly, this concept or idea of parent access, I really appreciate you putting that in there. And as we remember, for me, that was a deal breaker with second steps. And I'm serving notice to any vendor, that says, hey, we want to limit access or not create demo accounts, then we're not going to do business with them. I mean, I think that's got to be upfront, or that's a deal breaker, that demo accounts are available 24/7, all the time to our parents. So thank you.
Yep. Okay. Thank you so much. We appreciate that additional information and discussion. Okay, next on the agenda, item 8C, Tier 1 Life Skills Supports for Students beginning in the 2022-23 school year. This is a first reading, and I will turn the time over to Dr. Brian McGill, Director of Student Services.
Thank you, President Tingy, Canyon School Board. We're coming up on the 9 o'clock hour. I feel like it's a seventh inning stretch. I should be singing Neil Diamond's Sweet Caroline. Maybe Dr. Robbins can lead us on.
No. That's sung in Boston, so we don't
True,
do
good
that.
point.
We
Good
don't
point.
do that in New York.
Good point. And also, before I get started, I just wanted to express my gratitude to Stacy and her parent public patron comments. As a parent myself, having lived in the Draper and Sandy community and having kids in Canyon School District, we're always very appreciative when our school principals and administration and teachers involve the parents in the decision-making process of things. So I just wanted to express my gratitude to her. And we do have an advisory committee, so hopefully you'll learn a little bit about that as we go through this presentation here tonight. So in terms of setting the stage, there's just a few foundational items I wanted to speak to. The first of those is I want to give thanks and credit to our work groups. We've had about 25 educators who have committed time since the latter part of June over the summer in creating a lot of lessons that are in draft form, which again we'll bring before our parent advisory for feedback, input, and refinement. But I just want to tell them thanks because they've really put their heart and soul into this. And our team leads, our specialists that span over my department, Wendy Dow's department, federal and state programs, special ed, and instructional supports. It's been a true collaborative effort as we've been working together. I also want to just preface that life skills support is just one small fraction of the larger picture of creating Portrait of a Graduate for Canyons School District in terms of what that framework is going to look like. So I think there's a lot of things contextually that principals and schools in terms of programs can offer that support a lot of the lesson creation as it relates to life skills and skill development. In fact, as I was going through and the 3 lessons that I pulled out, for example, here tonight, reminded me a lot of when both of my children were at Willow Canyon. They had, be responsible, respectful, and safe. And we really appreciated that as parents because it allowed us a forum to have that conversation at home. And so the school would send home information, this month we're focused on this, and we could sit down with our kids and have those direct conversations and supporting them so that they're better students at school and hopefully, fingers crossed, better kids at home, right? So it's kind of fun seeing that. Also, we're proposing a field test so that we can get that advisory feedback. We also want to go about getting some quantitative and qualitative feedback from our principals, our teachers, parents, and students as far as the process goes. And doing a field test would allow us that opportunity to be able to do that this year. That would also allow us to adjust and expand and improve as needed. And then lastly, the last thing I want to say before I jump in is, again, with it being internally created, it's first of all, there's been a huge savings financially because we're not going out and paying a vendor $500,000 for a product. And the other nice thing about that is we do have control over the content in terms of what's being provided for our children. So I think those are key components as we get started here this evening. So I'm going to do some introductory slides, and then I'm going to turn some time over to Amber to talk a little bit about the crosswalk for our skill development and a curriculum creation and alignment. And then I'll do some wrap up, kind of similar to our last presentation. First off, just in terms of definitions, life skills can be seen as skills necessary or desirable for full participation in school, life, and one's future college and career pathway, and in order to contribute as a respectful and civically engaged citizen. And that's our hope through this, is that our students behave better, they become better thinkers, they learn more, that it creates to a positive culture and climate at the school, and that students are respectful of one another in the hallways and the classroom, so on and so forth. So life skills are comprised of really 3 different types of skill sets. So thinking skills, which again goes back to that critical thinking, creativity, problem solving, decision making. Personal skills such as self-management, responsible decision making, and then those interpersonal skills, communication, empathy, understanding, teamwork, service, cooperation, leadership, so on and so forth. Our purpose is to proactively teach skills to prevent challenges that occur when skills are absent or not yet automatic. And this last year, for a good part of the year, we were without a curriculum and resources. And we all know what the discipline referrals looked like for both office as well as school-wide, and also our issues with attendance, kids being targeted to class, so on and so forth. So what this does is it kind of focuses on the purpose of the Portrait of a Graduate. So if you look at that key on the upper right, you've got mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And what we've done is we've kind of devised these draft lessons around the purpose for students so that hopefully it motivates them and engages them in becoming better learners and better contributors at their school. And in doing that, they're contributing to the positive behavior intervention support, and again, creating that positive school culture and climate. We want to complement, as I mentioned up front, what is being taught at home. And personally, as a parent, like I said, I really appreciated Willow Canyon for the messaging they sent out and for the opportunities that lend itself to have those conversations at home with our parents or with our kids. Supporting students and striving for excellence in school and in all aspects of their life. One of the key things that I've found being an educator over heading into my 26th year, which by the way, it's going to be weird heading into a school year and not opening a school per se. but I love fall and I love football. So the Canyons principals will probably see me on the sidelines of some of their games. But the key really to all kids' success, I think both in school and life, really comes down to one key component, and that's intrinsically motivating kids in school. And when kids become intrinsically motivated, the light, in essence, turns on within them. And they want to be the best learners. They want to engage. They want to do well for themselves instead of, requiring those extrinsic rewards or other incentives, things of that nature. And I feel like with the life skills, it lends itself to provide that opportunity for our kids to become more motivated and more engaged in their studies and in all aspects of their life. So we've looked to try to align as best as possible to the human-centered supports component of the Canyon School District strategic vision and plan. And then also as part of that initiative in there, it describes creating and having social emotional health and development for life skills within that. Our targets, explicit skill development and critical competencies, again, are tied back to the portrait of a graduate, developmental research that ISD has taken on, and then just looking at our data trends that I've already made a reference to. So this just kind of shows you a conceptual framework of what we've done in terms of creating Canyon School District life skills curriculum units or critical competencies. And so what we've done here is we've looked at the strategic plan, the priorities there, the PCBL P20 competencies, which takes you preschool through higher ed in terms of those competencies and skill sets that at each level kids need to learn to be successful. And then we've also combined that with the associated skill sets for that particular competency. So the 5 kind of core areas right now that we're looking at is helping kids make responsible decisions. Again, kind of helping them choose right from wrong, and obviously having parents be a part of that process along the way is critically important. Building resilience, as we know that that's one of the key indicators for students actually finishing college, is not so much tied back to test scores and or even really GPA, but rather their work ethic, their discipline, persevering, and the resilience that they display in school. Setting goals for personal growth. Critically important there, right? We all have long-term goals for ourselves in life and for our children, and helping them to develop that through SMART goals, which is one of the 8th grade lessons that I'm going to show, again, is important. Understanding and serving our community. One of the things I loved, I talked about the context of what can enhance or encompass these lessons. And one of the things, like 2 of my favorite days at Alta High School, we would do a Veterans Day assembly every fall. And in November, we would have all of our students who had connections to family members, friends, neighbors within our given community. And we would invite them in. We would provide them with a breakfast, thank them for their service. We would ask our students to dress up to honor the veterans. And about 90% of our kids complied and did that. And I'm telling you, just how impactful and how powerful that assembly is. I was proud to be a part of it. And I can't tell you the number of veterans that came up afterward who are currently active and then some not active, that just really appreciated, what we did for them and honoring them as part of that. So as we talk about things like serving our community and service and recognition, respecting others, which is that last bullet point there, I think there's things that principals and schools can do programmatically to help support and again, provide context for these life skills. At the bottom there, you'll see each unit will have required and optional lessons to support classroom needs. Digital citizenship skills will be integrated into each unit, and Amber can speak to that a little bit closer, because I know ISD's had a integral hand in that process. And then just to show you the associated skills. So for example, taking that respecting self and others and resolving conflict, the things that we want kids to aspire to be is be positive, right? To be honest with each other, to make righteous decisions, to have integrity, to develop healthy friendships at school, cooperate with others, right? That teamwork, that collaboration, because we all know that's important, not only in school, but as they venture on into their career pathways. Setting personal boundaries, I think that's important for kids to understand too. Respecting, again, themselves as well as other students. Communicating effectively, and a couple of lessons that I'll showcase here highlight the importance of listening and focusing on your learning. And as I was telling my wife that I was bringing up 2 lessons on listening, she's like, well, maybe you should pay a little bit more closer attention to those lessons themselves. Maybe you should sit in a workshop on that. So, and I just turned to her and said, it's called selective listening. So, and then teamwork and then leadership. Obviously, leadership is a huge critical pillar for kids finding success, again, both in school and life. And I think we as parents aspire for our kids to lead in some capacity and to be engaged and to be connected and be involved in school. So as it relates to the developmental targets, I'm going to turn some time over to Amber, and she's going to share with you a few slides, and then she'll turn it back over to me. So Dr. Roderick Landward.
Thanks, Brian. And I just want to highlight, as we have been thinking about this curriculum, one of the things that we have taken very seriously is the board's commitment and all of the work that was done with the strategic planning to really think about developing skills in students that we can monitor and see and that they will leave our system having. And so to just echo what Brian said about the benefit of developing our own curriculum is that we can have control over that content. That said, we also don't want to lose sight of what Canyons prides themselves on, and that is developing a curriculum that is really high quality and still aligned to our policy, and that it is anchored in some research and standards and has an evidence base that we can look at. So as Brian mentioned, as we were looking at how to organize these units, we really took guidance from the strategic plan that pointed us in the direction of the Portrait of a Graduate. The Portrait of a Graduate has defined competencies as well as some skills listed, and we looked to further refine what are the skills associated with those particular characteristics and how can we narrow them in a way that allows us to look at a progression across K through 8 so that we are being systematic and thoughtful in developing skills that students need to be successful. We believe that the life skills curriculum is a complement to what the parents are doing at home, and that we are focusing on some of those really key skills that both our data and our students present a need for in terms of being able to develop some automaticity so that they can be successful with their academics as well. So you have a document on board docs that is called Developmental Targets that really provides a little bit of an overview of what this curriculum entails. So in order for our writing teams to successfully write lessons that progress across K through 8, we had to identify some targets to be able to get more concrete about what that progression looked like. So this slide just has a snapshot of the larger document that you have access to that highlights for each of those critical competencies or units, as we've organized them in terms of the curriculum, specific targets that highlight what students should know and be able to do over the course of those grade level bands. So while you have a developmental learning target or many developmental learning targets listed under each grade level band, depending on the specific grade level, you'll see something much more specific and concrete related to that target that then, of course, spans. So this is, again, a little bit bigger lens for those developmental learning targets, and then each lesson gets more specific in terms of the criteria for that particular learning. So taking those developmental targets, our lesson writing teams organized their lessons. As we started the process in organizing that work, we decided to look back into the Wonders materials because, as you recall, when we adopted Wonders for English Language Arts, we kind of ignored the SEL lessons because that wasn't what we were looking to consider at the time. And then I believe a couple of you said, is it worth looking into that when we do get to the point of writing or selecting the curriculum to be able to support life skills? We did go back into that, and we are recommending that for kindergarten and first grade, we use those lessons. Those lessons are organized in a format similar to what we'll be writing for 2nd through 8th grade, which I'll get into in just a moment. The lesson structure is a 15-minute lesson organized each week And it has these 5 specific components. So the lesson begins with the teacher in an engage together section by building background knowledge on the specific skill. They then explore together. Often this is done through a media-based investigation where the teacher shows a video or shows and plays a song. And then they provide some more explicit learning through the connection component where the students are engaged in talking about the video or the song. Some lessons have a role play, others they're writing a reflection. Again, writing, kindergarten and first grade, keep that in mind. And then the lesson ends with a mindful moment where the students are taking a deep breath, pausing to reflect on the lesson. So very short lesson and then reinforced over the course of the week. And then there's a specific family component built in that parents can access, teachers can send to parents. It's available both ways, that highlights what the skill is and provide some options for parents to provide reinforcement and application at home. So here's an example of what that lesson looks like. The philosophy that the publishers take with the Wonders curriculum around these life skills is organized around the whole child component, which involves the social emotional learning lessons that I just mentioned have the specific components. Habits of learning, which become that reinforcement in the academic components, and then the classroom culture, which is, again, part of that collaborative PBIS and loving to learn, learning culture that is set up. The lesson plan, you can see how it's organized in those 4 components. And again, all of this is even accessible now within the program because we're using the ELA portion. So that is our recommendation for kindergarten and first grade. For 2nd and 8th grade, we will utilize those lessons that are being drafted right now, as Brian mentioned, by the writing teams. And we have supported those teams with a specific lesson plan template because, again, we have high standards for our curriculum in Canyons, and so we wanted to ensure that we were organizing lessons very systematically and in a fashion that was consistent and part of a routine that our teachers could easily implement while also meeting the specific needs of the schools as identified by these particular skill components. So the lessons will be structured in a 15 to 20-minute lesson that is taught each week and then has reinforcement. The lesson structure was designed specifically around components for building community and a responsive culture, which is similar to what our elementary schools have already been implementing with their morning meeting structure and to what our middle schools have been implementing in their advisory time period. So we really wanted to focus on taking advantage of the strengths that they already have in place with those structures and then focusing the lesson accordingly. So the 15 to 20-minute lesson that will occur each week will begin with a greeting the students, again, to immediately set that positive tone, create that community, and continue to build safety and respect within the classroom. The lesson then opens with a sharing component and the opportunity for students to connect and build that classroom community. And then the teacher will move into the explicit part of the instruction where the learning activity encompasses some interactive components around building those specific skills. We organized the lesson template for the teams to create a much more interactive and cooperative experience so that, again, we're focused on building these skills cooperatively. And then the lesson closes with a message to wrap up the learning and to challenge students and commit to the practice. The lesson then includes specific applications for the teachers to include to reinforce and practice the concept and to encourage the reflection as well as the ongoing reinforcement of those skills. So the lesson occurs once a week, but then that reinforcement would occur daily. And this is where we can start looking at some of those specific ties to where we would communicate and provide that support to families each week with those specific skills. So with that, we have the lesson plan. This is not the template, this is the actual lesson plan. We were gonna walk through these for a sample of our 3rd and 8th grade lesson.
So what we did here is we provided you with 3 sample lessons, this being the 3rd grade. What was kind of fun for me is we're again in the process of trying to like finalize these drafts of just getting some core content together. So we have something to work with the advisory committee and something finalized, hopefully at some point, to bring to the board so we can implement this stuff come September so teachers and students have access to it. But it was really interesting pulling these lessons because these were actually lessons that I did in elementary school back in the day. And that's going back decades. I won't mention how many decades, but it is going back a few decades. So it was kind of fun to be able to see some of the lessons that were tied into this and kind of walking through that lesson and kind of reflecting back on my own personal experience of having been in elementary school. So the lesson itself shows you the lesson plan template. Two components that we've been talking about at MTSS and adding is a row that actually aligns it explicitly with the strategic plan language. And then another row that I think would be good from the advisory group would be to get a parent reinforcement component. So as we have that advisory group, we can get feedback and input from parents on how they could reinforce a lot of these lessons at home as well. So this third grade lesson is a ball toss where the kids learn each other's name. So it's kind of fun because it integrates the movement into their learning. But you can look up there at the topic, the learning intention, that kids can practice their listening skills and learn strategies to focus on attention. The tie-in with the portrait of a graduate. And like I said, in this particular instance, the activity would be ball tossing or ball rolling from one kid to another, saying each other's names so they can kind of get, familiar with who each other is, an introductory activity. And then to expand upon that, to make it more challenging, as you can look in the learning activity there down towards the bottom, you can play what's called My Turn, Your Turn, where the students give a series of directions. The example up there is, for example, like touch your nose, touch your ear, roll the ball, and then see if everybody can kind of follow along, see if they're listening, right, paying attention. So that's the third grade lesson. Again, these are 15-minute lessons over the course of a week. So the fifth grade is also focused on the art and skill of listening. And it was fun. I remember doing this. I think it was like 5th or 6th grade. Here, the lesson topic, again, is on listening with attention. You can see what the learning intention there is, that we can listen with attention skills to focus our attention so that they can work towards personal and academic goals. The tie-in with the portrait of a graduate there. But this particular game, and probably many of us may have done this in school, but you start with a statement like on one end of the classroom, and then you work all the way through all the rows. And then as it gets to the tail end, you see what that end product is of the statement. And a lot of times, it's never what it started out being, right? And so being able to have conversations with kids on, again, the importance of listening, having effective communication. I think in this digital world, having an activity like this and helping kids understand and how it applies with texting and social media, which is the most likely majority used language that a lot of our kids are using nowadays when they communicate, especially outside of school, and how many times that information can be misinterpreted or misassumed or misread, right? And then what that does as far as communication. So those are just a couple sample lessons for 3rd and 5th grade. And then the 8th grade lesson, again, is tied into personal growth. And that's just helping kids understand the SMART acronym and establishing goals in relationship to that. And I've used this multiple times in my life. I remember learning this as a student in middle school, in high school, and even in college. And just last night, I ran into one of my former students at Alta who's going to be a senior next year and at the gym. And we had about a 20-minute exchange and conversation. And as I'm reflecting on looking at this lesson plan, it was a lesson that I was teaching him as it relates to SMART goals and training and working out because he has some specific goals that he wants to meet and helping him get to that. So again, just using those SMART goals to help us in our personal growth as well as professional growth, or in this case, school growth. So again, goals that are specific, measurable, action, realistic, and time bound. So, and in order to get to your long-term goals, you got to have short-term goals to help build those building blocks along the way. So implementation plan, as I mentioned, we're going to have an advisory review council. Right now, I've got about 25 parents on that. It's very heavily representative of the southern part of our district. I would love to get some more parents on the north end so we can kind of keep that balanced. But right now I have a lot of parents that have interest and they're eager and wanting to help provide feedback, input, and reviews of the curriculum. And so we're going to provide that opportunity. Right now, we're in the process of doing a full internal review. So the team leads, the specialists that have been overseeing the work groups, my department, instructional supports, and our MTSS team are all going to have eyes on the material, as well as obviously the advisory committee. But I want it to be of quality, and I want it to be in a organizational structure. So when we go to present to the parents, that it's not a mess, so to speak, that it's cleanly organized to help them manage their time, because they're going to be contributing their time and volunteering their hours. So we want to make it worthwhile for them. Again, I think the end goal is to try to have something at some point in September. I didn't put a specific date in there because, again, a lot of this is going to be time specific in terms of when we can get all the, like I said, the lessons reviewed, get the advisory group together. Might even be a couple of times that we pull everybody together for that. And then again, with doing a field test for this year, it lends itself for us to be able to do a lot of measurements, right? Is it effective? Is it working? Looking at the quantitative data that we know was troubling this last year with discipline referrals and attendance. And then looking at some of our early warning system data, is it having an impact? Is it having a difference? And sometimes we know that takes time, right? That it just doesn't happen overnight. But I think getting that alongside qualitative measurements, again, feedback from kids, from our teachers, from parents, from administrators on how it's working, how it's going. So again, we can make adjustments and finalize it for a potential proposal for implementation next year in terms of a full board adoption. So in wrapping up, we'll open it up for questions. This concluding slide here just kind of gives you some visuals. So we've got the strategic plan, portrait of a graduate, and what I've done there is highlighted the 5 competencies or characteristics that tie into that purpose key that's up top. So again, each of these guiding life decisions, influencing behavior, shaping goals, having a sense of direction, and creating meaning. So we want kids to be motivated in their learning. And then I've just got the 5 unit areas listed there as well. So Amber and I are open to questions. So
Thank you so much. I'd like to give Superintendent a minute first before we have board questions.
Thank you, President Tini. First off, Dr. McGill and Dr. Landward, just want to tell you both how much I appreciate your work on this and all of the effort, all of our teachers and coaches and specialists that have worked on this. Just for me, from my perspective, from our last board meeting, some of the concerns that I shared, I think you clearly addressed, and I think it is very reflective of the strategic vision and plan that the board set out, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate the transparency. I think before we get into the questions, one thing that we do need to talk about is process, right? So you've got 5 focus areas. Obviously, all of those lessons are not created at this point, right? Or they're close to, or they're in process.
Yeah, they're in process.
So I think thinking about just curriculum review and adoption, we're looking at a kind of a 3 reading process like we traditionally have. And it's in a pilot situation, as you mentioned. So what I'm thinking here is that out of the 5, then you're probably looking at like a cycle at least 3 times through the year, at least twice, minimum, probably 3 times, that it would probably overlap. So the board and the public have an opportunity at large to look at those plans as they come on board. And then internally, you're running these feedback loops within the parent advisory and within our own staff, right? Is that how you're kind of seeing it?
And I think the other part to all of this too is, we've talked about embedding this into Canvas. So that would provide students and parents full transparency, full access. And I think it would allow for a lot of integration and support home between the school and parents. I happen to mention the messaging that Willow Canyon Elementary provided to my wife and I, and we really appreciated that, so we could sit down with our kids and have those conversations. And having a little guy, although he hates me to call him little guy because he's now 6'2" and about 230 and looks down at me when I talk to him, but he has special needs. And we really appreciated getting that information home because it took a lot of coaching and still requires a lot of coaching from us as parents to help guide him and lead him. And we do rely upon the support structure at the school and the teaching and the reinforcement that happens there. But it's best when parents and teachers and school communities are working collectively together. And I
So-
firmly believe that.
So we would essentially go through potentially three intervals, and then we would set up for full curriculum adoption in the spring.
Correct.
Is that,
Yeah.
okay, that's kind of what we're
Mhm.
thinking. Okay, and then I just want to make one other point too, is that I think, and I mentioned this before, all of the data that you shared with us about student behavior and just our attendance issues and our office referrals and everything that's happening, how needed this really is. And our teachers, I think, are going to be so appreciative. I think my understanding too is that it does have the capability to be on demand. So if the school, has certain issues they're working on, that they can pull those lessons as needed. Is that also, so we're not lockstep teaching the very same thing all of the time. And then one other point with that is that on a macro level, we have all of these systems in place, right, that are actively, reviewing and changing or refining. But I think it's also important right down to the school level, at a classroom level that's granular, that we're communicating out front to parents that this is, here's what, whether it's a school or at the teacher level. But because sometimes I think, it's easy to, you may not be paying attention to what's happening at the district level with review and approval, but just simply knowing each week or what we're working on that week as a parent, that this is what's going to come home, and take a look at it. How, like you said, how can I reinforce that? I think that's great. So is that kind of
Yeah,
on the right
I would
lines
agree
there?
with that. Yeah, I mean, at a minimum, I see pulling the advisory group together probably at least a couple of times between now and sometime in September, after we have these internal reviews of the lessons themselves. And then I think there's a lot of power in giving schools a little bit of autonomy, right? Like you said, choosing what works best and what the highest needs are for that given school community. I did survey all of our elementary and middle school principals, and I found it interesting that their top two were helping kids make responsible decisions, and go figure, right, with the behavior we saw. And I saw it personally as a principal this last fall. I've never seen anything like it in 25 years. And then the second one of those was setting goals for personal growth for students as well. So helping them grow and develop in that capacity. And then I think, the school messaging home with parents, coupled with, I think, what our communications team could lend and provide. I know Justin Anderson is putting together some parent videos to tie directly in with this as well, to help with that messaging and to reinforce each of these components at home. So.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Muriel. I turn the time back to the present team. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that additional information. Several board members have questions and / comments. So we'll start with Mrs. Oakes, Mr. Wrigley, and then Mrs. Nybauer.
Thanks so much, Fran. That was awesome. This is a ton of work. It's a very heavy lift, and I recognize there's a lot of you that have been working on it, and you've been reaching out and seeking out which parents would like to give input. And I think you've done a great job really trying to do something that no district has done before, and creating their own. And I love that it's going to be homegrown and it's going to reflect Canyon's values. I do have a question with regard to the Wonders SEL piece. I'm wondering if there's any way for us to be able to have access or look at the kindergarten and first grade SEL lessons. Okay, I would like to take a look at it personally. And also, through this process, similar to what Dr. Robbins was saying, and making sure that this entire adoption process is very transparent and open to the public. If there's a way for the public to be able to get on and see those, for that it's open between now and whenever we end up approving this as a board, I think would be important.
Because we've adopted Wonders, technically everybody has access now. So what I'll do is write up the instructions about how to access and where to find it in the system so that you can go right to those particular lessons.
That's great. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Wrigley?
I appreciate all you and your staff have done this summer. We have gone through 2 hell years thinking that this would be a year that everybody can go on vacation. But you and most of your staff spent the entire summer developing a curriculum so that we didn't have to go out and try to fix a national curriculum and change it so much to meet our values that it would work. So thank you. I assume that your top number one goal in this program is not to be castle approved.
Correct, which is why we're customizing. what
So
we've
we're
created.
not
So-
worrying about that.
And believe me, to be completely transparent, I looked at all of the language from the onset in terms of what we're developing. And I think one of the advantages of being in this position, again, as a parent in this district and having been an educator in this district and a graduate of this district, that I think it has an even I have even a closer lens and, you know, interest, if you will, in ensuring that what we're providing is meeting the needs of our kids and doing it in the right format. So
Yeah, that was the
hopefully that
problem.
helps.
Most of the national curriculum that we looked at is that they met the council requirements. So this is good to hear that we're not moving that direction. Our teachers over this last year have gone through so much. They were screaming at us for a curriculum, mostly because a teacher cannot teach if the kids cannot learn. And that's what's happened over the last couple of years. My daughter just recently took a position at Jordan High with some ninth graders, and she said, "Dad, these kids have no empathy. They have no structure." These were seventh graders 2 years ago when all this stuff happened. And she was saying it's difficult to teach. And we're finding that with a lot of our teachers are saying, we have to do something, otherwise we're leaving the profession. It's not the reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's the behaviors of our students and the social emotional skills that have just sort of fallen apart. So I'm glad to see that we're moving this direction. I'm also glad to see that basically the stuff we're teaching are the basic core principles that we should have learned in kindergarten. These are not value driven like a lot of the curriculums where personal values, whatever that may be. They're going back to core principles that these individual students should know to be successful. One of them is resilience. We're finding that about 40% of our students that graduate and go into college bomb out. They have no resiliency skills. So I'm hoping as we now go college and career, that this curriculum will give them the life skills to also be not just educated, but to have those emotional quotient skills that they'll be successful. We often worry about reading and writing and arithmetic scores, but really in employment, what gets you canned are your social emotional skills. And if you don't have those particular skills, which we're finding a lot of the new generation coming out don't, then they're not going to be successful as parents and in life or whatever. I also like this that it's a pilot. We're starting off. I mean, it's impossible to put this lesson. I think there was 500 lessons or something.
432.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it's impossible to do that many
in about a
lessons over the
5-week
summer.
span.
But I would, as we talked before, I would not encourage you to do that many because we need to build it as we go. So as you put together that with the parents, we find out and the teachers, we find out what works, what doesn't work. We could tweak over this next year. And then come out with a product for next year that's solid, and then we can start doing the research on it that this district always does to see make sure it's meeting those criteria. The other thing I think you tried to work on that a lot of the national curriculum, and we talked a little bit about Leader in Me and some others, are extremely time intensive for our teachers to implement. A lot of those would take, they've got enough stuff on their plates, especially our elementary teachers who are saying, I've got to have something, but I can't have too much because if I have too much, I'm going to break this year. So this program's going to be, it will take some additional time, but hopefully be able to integrate into their curriculum, not be so time intensive that they're going to take hours away learning some different philosophies. So I'm glad to see that. We own it. We can decide what to do with it, how we're going to change it. If we have comments from the public saying, I don't like that, just particular thing, we probably need to run it against a whole group of parents, as you've done, to make sure that that is what the public's wanting, not just one or two. But we can change that. We can modify that and to do what we need to do. I'm just delighted that you spent so much time, not delighted. Anyway, happy, I guess, that you spent so much time and really appreciative of everybody that did it. I'm hoping as we move forward with the teachers that one of the things you're going to be doing is rolling out a training curriculum. You'll be sharing that with us as to what this will look like and how that will put in and won't be such a heavy burden. But we really do need this year something for our teachers. That that's the main thing. It's not that, we've got a new, reading curriculum, we got a new math group, we got to do this and that. That's not going to break them as much as if the kids are unable to learn in the class when we present this. This is critical that we move forward with some kind of a life skills program for these kids. They're getting bombarded everywhere with inappropriate life skills. And I'm really grateful that it's based upon principles. So just thank you for all this. I look forward to looking forward to what's happening on that, getting our input from our families, and being able to actually develop a program that's going to meet the needs of our district for the years to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Mrs. Neubauer.
I'm going to briefly say thank you. This was a lot of work, and I really appreciate the extensive phone call we had together and with Amber. Thank you so much. You were going through this, the thing I'm really thrilled about is we've got some changes to the life skill units, and it reminded me of Dr. Briscoe and the book he used to talk about, and how great leadership in schools reflects the principles and the values of the community we serve. And I think that's what you've really done as you have held on to our strategic plan. And I love the lesson plans. The lesson plans are simple and easy to implement for the teacher, but they're fun for the kids. Okay, a few thoughts. We talked about, and you've talked about how the easiest way to implement it so the parents get their eyes on it first is to put it in Canvas. I think it would be great with the lesson overview if the first step is posted on Canvas so parents may have the first look and discussion with their child. Because I think when we set this out to the public, that's going to provide so much reassurance to these parents, and they're going to be thrilled. They're going to open up the lesson plan and go, look at that. That's the first step. And that's kind of that reverse classroom idea, like you talked about with your son, that I can feel totally relieved as a parent if I have a child that has anxiety. Oh, good. I get the first take at a discussion before they go and talk about it. So that's one thought. I have a few other thoughts, and it's about the crosswalk. And we talked about this a little bit. I just wanted to go through it again. Maybe we can pull it up on the screen, the life skills crosswalk. So this is one unit that I wish was carried out with a little more detail. Thank you, Amber. She's trying to go over there. So it's the third attachment, the life skills crosswalk. While she's pulling it up, I'm going to read part of our Human-Centered Support Strategic Initiative. And how awesome was that? That we went through and gathered parents and teachers and administrators and went through those workshops and gathered the data from surveys and really had it funneled down through all the lenses. The strategic initiative says, CSD will implement tiered systems to support the social, emotional, and mental well-being of students that foster honesty, integrity, responsibility, hard work, resilience, lifelong learning, personal growth, service, and respect. And on your units, with the previous slide, you have encapsulated all of those except for the honesty and integrity. When we look at the crosswalk here, we see Utah Portrait of a Graduate, honesty and integrity, and then we look at the associated life skills. And in the Utah Portrait of a Graduate, it actually has, these are the life skills. Students can demonstrate they are trustworthy, ethical, reliable, and accountable for the results they produce. I'm seeing accountability here when you're saying accepting responsibility for actions in that third column. But I'm seeing demonstrating empathy, and I would love to see demonstrates ability to be trustworthy, ethical, and as simple as a lesson plan. What does honesty mean? By the end of this lesson, students will be able to identify what it means to be honest. Why is honesty important? What are the consequences of dishonesty? What are the qualities of honest people? how can you demonstrate the trait of honesty in the following situations and little scenarios? I think this will really drastically improve student life, because I think when kids make mistakes, the hardest thing in the world is to admit they make a mistake. They want to hide it. We live in this world where everyone wants to be perfect. And on social media, these kids think they're going to be perfect and look perfect and everything's going to be perfect. And I'd love for us to have lesson plans. Okay, sometimes, even though you think through your decision, you make a mistake. That's okay, then what? Making mistakes is part of growth and learning, and it's okay. But what we need you to do is be honest. If your friend on the playground starts bullying someone, you need to be honest and confess you saw your friend bullying. Think of how quicker everyone can heal and move forward, and less time and resource we take with administrators and teachers investigating and figuring out what happens. So I think that teaching the importance of honesty, and when you make a mistake, to be honest. And I would love to see that in a concrete associated life skill and lesson plan. And then just the other idea is under service. When we look in that third column, if you scroll down by service, we have, these are the concrete skills. Use, apply, display empathy. Where are you? I think you guys scroll
down.
Right there, right there, right there. Yep.
Service. There we
Okay,
go.
so third column, these are the life skills we're teaching. Use, apply, display empathy. If you're empathetic, maybe you're more likely to serve people. Respecting diverse perspectives, I think that goes more under respect than service. Demonstrating compassion for others, that one's fine. Demonstrating cultural competency and understanding, I think that goes more to respect than service. Hearing others' perspectives, again, to me, isn't reflecting service. So I would love for that to tie more into the service and talk about how students can look for ways to benefit the classroom or the playground and do something nice, not expecting a reward or not expecting praise. And we can really hone down for these kids, what does it mean to better those around you? What does it mean to look at how to help the whole and look outside of yourself? And so I would love to see a little bit more concrete life skills in that way. Something interesting, I was just reading an article in Forbes. The number one character trait employers look for in successful companies is if the person they are interviewing demonstrates honesty and trustworthiness, which, seems like an obvious thing, but that's a life skill. And I think our kids are really afraid of admitting sometimes when they make mistakes. And that's where the dishonesty comes in. And I think that will help them with the resilience. But anyway, thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. So excited to see this.
Well, and I appreciate your feedback and input. That's the beauty of this, is the fact that it's ours, right? So we can customize it and we can make improvements and we can refine it and we can add where there may be gaps, right? And then the other parts of this too is, again, this is just one component of a larger framework of what we're creating as it relates to a Canyon School District portrait of a graduate, right? So I look at something like service. A lot of us aren't going to learn service in a 15-minute lesson in a class every given week, right? And that's why I think it's important for principals as they roll these out to contextualize that in terms of what that looks like in their given community. For me, I probably, as far as in school, learned the importance and value of service by being part of the peer leadership team at Alta High School. And honestly, that experience and the learning that took place by going down to our local elementaries and working with these kids who saw us as heroes and helping them with self-esteem and, building self-confidence and just playing games and making connections. It was so rewarding, right? Going back to what you talked about, doing things without expecting some sort of external reward, right? And honestly, it's the very reason why I stand here today. And it's the very reason why I chose this pathway as an educator, is the profound influence and impact that Vicki Iverson, who was my teacher at the time at Alta High School, which, by the way, we're supposed to be having lunch this weekend. I haven't seen her in like 25 years, just to tell her thanks. But I think there's things that principals again can do, and they're building leadership teams as we roll this out, that they can support it with the very things that they're doing in the school and make it just that much larger and more robust so that kids, you know, yes, there's a lesson, but we're putting it into context or providing opportunities programmatically for kids to be able to do this, right? And another program I can think of is Link Crew, having our upperclassmen serve and mentor our underclassmen, which is a program we started at Alta. So I think there's a lot of opportunities that we can support that, maybe not necessarily in a lesson per se, but to have it be supported contextually through other opportunities within the school or within the district. So
I think that's a great idea. And as you were talking about the different opportunities for leadership, Dr. Robbins always talks about servant leadership. And he's a good example of that. And thinking about these students talking about how to be a leader amongst your peers and what servant leadership looks like, you know.
And as an educator, servant leadership is probably one of the most needed. So.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to add my recognition for how much work has happened since we last met, and I appreciate it. And I really appreciate the structure that you've put together, whether it's this crosswalk or the lesson plans, and I feel like that structure, even though it's still in process, right? We're still kind of working on things, but by doing that, it does then allow for modifications, for customization, for all of those things. And like has been said, how great it is that we've got such talented people here in Canyons District, and I just am really excited for what we'll be able to accomplish, and appreciate the work that has gone into it this far and will yet go into it. But what?
I'm sorry, I said, and let's publish it and make lots of money.
Well, I was going to ask about whatever intellectual property rights we can claim. So anyway, that's really great. But I just kind of want to maybe clarify a little bit about what next step is and what the board feels comfortable with doing. This is listed as a first reading. I feel like there's probably, we should probably get eyes on it again. And so I'm just kind of thinking timing wise, when are you thinking the advisory committee will?
Well, we have to do internal reviews, and so my team, we have all of our wellness staff that's back, our school psychs, counselors, social workers, nurses, school-based mental health professionals, and so my team, who are the team leads over all this, are also training these staff this week and getting prepared for the school year. So a lot of this review is going to be probably happening outside of traditional work hours. So depending upon how quick we can get that done, hopefully sooner versus later, and then I'm intending on sending the advisory email out this week to several of our parents to see, one, if they can commit to it, if they want to commit to it, and two, if they have the time, and give them probably some example windows of when we might meet and how much time that the commitment would take. And I appreciate the boards. I've had a lot of referrals from you guys in terms of parents in each of your communities, and some have great experience in this, both from educational lens, also from a clinical and medical pediatrician lens. And so we've got some great parents that want to step up and help provide some feedback in it. So internal reviews, have the advisory committee meet, get feedback and reviews from them, and then hopefully bring it back before this body again. So whether that's August 16th or the first meeting in September, that would be my goal, one or the other. So.
Okay, board, does that sound like a reasonable plan then? So we'll just kind of wait to hear from you when you're ready to bring it back to us. Okay.
Sounds great.
Anything else? All right. Thank
Thanks,
you
everyone.
again, and please extend our appreciation to the team.
I will.
I'll just say the team, because I can't even begin to recognize who all was involved, but I know.
Yeah, we
it's
had
been-
25 educators within our district, and then we had 12 team leads that that have been overseeing the project. So, and yeah, being a building principal, I always took like 2 or 3 weeks off in July, and I think my mind and body's like, when's that coming?
Yeah.
And
Is it July
my
yet?
wife has a big birthday. I won't mention which year this year because she'd kill me. But we've talked about maybe doing something in October for her birthday, maybe take a few days and go somewhere fun. So yeah, but it's been fun. I've enjoyed being a part of this process. And again, those that have committed time have done a pretty amazing job with the limited time that we've had over these last 5 weeks. So I appreciate your sentiment.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that concludes the items under new business. And now I'll turn time over to Superintendent Robbins for a report and then to Business Administrator Leon Wilcox for a report.
Thank you, President Tini. Just a couple of things. First off, just want to give a shout out to our principals that are back. They had their first day critical policies meeting, and I mentioned this before, but the last 2 Julys over the last 2 years, I think, you know, I saw them like every day in the month of July, and they didn't take any time off, and they were just like really burning the midnight oil. Remember last year at this time, we were right in the middle of a surge and we had all these issues. And it's just been great to see them re-energized and smiling and excited. Many of them have taken some time off really for the first time in a couple of years. So just great to see them back. I just wanted to comment too earlier, I appreciate the comments from our parents on their input on their concerns about the books. All Boys Aren't Blue. That book actually is not in circulation in Canyon School District. It was originally located at Alta High and deselected in January. So it's not in circulation in print nor in digital copy. Currently in the district, there are 19 books that are either under review or under challenge. 8 of those have already been deselected and the others are currently in the process. So I think, you know, one recommendation I have, and I think, and I don't want to get into the, in a future meeting, we'll be talking about the new model policy and what we're currently doing with our policy. But part of that would be just being transparent about which books have been identified and where they're at in the process. So I think, you know, our parents and our community can look forward to that, but just wanted to point that out. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wilcox.
Yes, thank you, President Tingy. Just want to give a big thank you to our IT team for our registration that started yesterday. Yesterday, I think, was our biggest one day ever as we registered nearly 16,000 students. Their parents got online, completed the registration. Did have a few hiccups, was slow, some programming issues in the morning, but it did pick up in the afternoon. But again, 16,000 yesterday, another 3,800 today, so roughly 20,000. We will be sending out robocalls starting tomorrow, hopefully to get those completed. Also, a big thank you to our team, contractors, architects at Glacier Hills. Our fire marshal this afternoon gave us occupancy for our teachers to come back and start working in there later this week. So he's asked us to keep students out till we get some more contractors out later this week, but we'll be ready to go on the 15th there with the ribbon cutting next week, next Thursday, as mentioned by Jeff and Kirsten. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, board member comments. Let's start with Mrs. Neibauer.
I wanted to begin by thanking the parents who came and spoke during patron comments as well. And I believe one of you, maybe you're still here, or it was the other person who's not here anymore, sent me a elementary school book. And I did talk to our district library media specialist, and that book was weeded out. I really want to thank again, Dr. McGill and Dr. Roderick Landward for all the time. As we're talking about, this summer has been easier for everyone else, probably not you. But thank you. As you were concluding, I'm envisioning in my mind a little service lesson plan where 4th graders get excited about going and picking up trash on the playground because they're doing service, or they surprise the custodian by emptying the garbages, and getting the kids excited about what that feels like just to help the school. And your lesson plans, the ball toss, all of it. It's just exciting because we're engaging these kids in a friendly, fun way inside the classroom, which will then also play over to the playground, because that's when they get the other time they get the social interaction. So I see this as not only a life skills, but an opportunity for them to have more social interaction too in the classroom. So I love the way you've structured that. So thank you so much for that work. In conclusion, I want to thank our teachers. I have a little boy going into first grade this year, and he asked me the other night, can we start counting down the days till school starts? His teacher built such a great sense of love and confidence in him that he can't wait to get back to school. And we have so many teachers that do that, and I'm so grateful for them. And as I drive past the schools and those parking lots that are starting to fill up as teachers prepare for the classroom, what an inordinate amount of time and work and effort it is to be ready for the first day. And I'll only be sending 4 to Canyon School District Public Schools this year because my youngest isn't ready for kindergarten yet. And I will have 2 that are now postgraduates of Canyon. So this feels a little odd. I only have 4 going, but so excited for all the wonderful experiences they have, not only in the classroom, but just with student life. So thank you to Canyons for all the good we're doing. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Wrigley?
I look forward tomorrow to our new teacher celebration. As you can see, I sort of got excited last year. I am so appreciative of those teachers in choosing to work for our district when they had so many other district opportunities they could have worked for, and they chose us. And I know we won't let them down on that. I'm also express my gratitude for our teachers that have hung in there through the last couple of years and that are moving forward this next year. This has been a very difficult year, 2 years, for our teachers, our staff, our administrators. I'm hoping that as we move into this new school year, it opens up new opportunities. The staff, administration, and the board have been working really hard to try to make up for all the damage that's been done over the last 2 years. To be able to change the school environments back to what they were pre-pandemic and maybe even better. This new curriculum we're talking about, life skills, I'm hoping is going to help with that. We've got several new educational curriculum coming out, which I'm hoping is going to be even more enhanced and better, and maybe get our kids back up to level. And I am very excited to find out that the rest of the country lost 3 to 5 years in their elementary educational level because of that. And the state of Utah and our district have lost very little. Our teachers have, because we fought to keep the schools open and provided great educational opportunities during that time, that we did not hear all the problems that the rest of the country is. So with that, I thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Oakes?
Thanks. I echo what a lot of my board members have said about the excitement that comes with the new school year. One of the things that caught my attention with the safety presentation that was given during the study session is specific to cell phone use. I thought it was interesting. All of our principals were asked the question that, in your opinion, would a restriction or prohibition of cell phone use in schools lead to a reduction in online bullying and harassment in Canyon School District schools? And 27 said yes, 14 said no. And it makes me think a lot about whether or not as a board, if we should be having a larger discussion and put that on a future agenda to discuss what possible benefits we would have as a school district in choosing to have stricter cell phone policies. I know a couple of our middle schools, specifically Butler and Draper Park, have done so. And from what I understand, they've had great results. I'd be interested in seeing the data associated with that. So anyway, that's just one thing I'd like to highlight. And the other is I've been thinking a great deal, especially as I've been knocking doors during my campaign and speaking with patrons about the importance of teaching civility and patriotism. I know I've mentioned this before, but I loved what Dr. McGill shared about what you did for the veterans in your area. I think that's really a meaningful experience for those kids. I mean, I've had experiences before where veterans have been in the room, and when people stand to honor their service, and as a young kid, that made a huge impression on me. I feel like it's really important for us to prioritize those experience with our students, for them to have a deeper appreciation for the sacrifice of our servicemen and women. One patron actually brought up the question about why is it in our senior awards evenings we aren't honoring those students who have been admitted into the military academies, because it's such a profound honor. I mean, they have to have letters of recommendation from governors, from senators, from congressmen, and to be able to be admitted to that in many ways is significantly more difficult than being a National Merit Scholar. And so I think that is something that, again, I'd like to see us add on a future agenda about what we can do as a board to establish policies or procedures to make sure that our kids are really gaining a deeper appreciation of our nation and the importance of their civic duty. So anyway, those are two of my thoughts.
Thank you. Mrs. Arnold? So that Mrs. Tingy has time and we can be out of here at 10, because my gift to you is to be out of here at 10. I just want to thank you, and we're moving on. Okay, thank you. Mr. Millerberg.
I've been chuckling over here a little bit about whether I'd be able to say anything or whether I would have to walk out. I don't know how many of you are aware of it. Today was the Great Smoke-Off. And for those of you that are not aware of the Great Smoke-Off, in the Transportation Department, as we start coming back for school, Jeremy Wardell organizes a luncheon for the bus drivers and people working in transportation. It's been several years that he's been doing that, and it's always fun for me when I get the phone call, get the email that says we're going out for a smoke. You want to go? I joke with my wife and tell her I've been out smoking with my buddies today. But it's always a nice deal that he does to build team camaraderie in the transportation department, and good food too. The other thing I want to mention is the amount of work that has taken place this summer with the EMT group. Jeff has been spearheading this to make it happen. That is no small undertaking when you look at 41 schools, reviewing the safety plan for all 41 schools, looking for holes in our programs, looking for things that we could do better in all of our schools, looking for policy that may need to be made, may need to be changed, and making sure as best we can that our kids go to school and school is a safe place. I think you would ask most people what they want out of their school, and they're going to say, I'd like my kids to get educated. I maintain the number one item I want from our schools is when my grandkids go to school, I know they are safe. Education, to me, is in second place to being safe. So for all those that have been working on the EMT, the emergency management, what is that? What's the T stand for? Team? Okay. All summer long, the sense of urgency that's involved there is amazing. The direction that team has to make our schools safe is amazing to me as well. We've been very, very fortunate in Canyon School District during our lifetime as a district. And I believe that as we tighten up our safety policies, we look at our procedures, that I hope that in the future, it's not luck, it's good planning that makes it happen, because people will know that we are prepared.
Okay, thank you. So do I take all 10 minutes? No, I'm just going to again share my
thoughts about the start of school year. It's been mentioned a few times, and tomorrow's, so every year I like to celebrate first day. I mean, to me, I think it's a holiday. It deserves a title. And so I call it first day. And I'm excited that tomorrow is first day for many of our teachers and educators and employees. And I hope that they have the excitement and the confidence in us, not only as a board, but as district leaders, that their experience will be good, whether they're a student or whether they're an employee. And I really am excited for this school year, and especially with our strategic plan in place and all the discussions that we've had just in tonight's meeting, how broad-based the work of this district is, whether it's our safety report or our literacy and libraries and the life skills and all of those things just all come together, and with the idea that we are creating an amazing experience for both the educators, employees, and the students and families. So anyway, I just wish everyone well this last 10 days, I guess, or so of summer. And as we head into our own first days, I hope we can feel the excitement and the enthusiasm and have the energy to make this year the best year we've had. So with that, if there's nothing else, I declare this meeting is adjourned.